So good afternoon to all. The first speaker that we have, it's a very known person related with transport, Professor Roger Wickenman, is visiting professor of the Department of Civil Engineering and Environment of the Imperial College in London, is chair of the Transport Strategy Center. Is also emeritus professor of European economics at University of Kent, and his main education was related with Cambridge, the University of Cambridge and Sussex. So he is very known for all about transport and special infrastructure. So we are very pleased to have him with us. So, Professor Roger, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I try to share my screen. So what I want to talk about is the way that air transport relates to regional development, but in particular, how we can evaluate the benefits of a regional airport and how that relates to the airport system in an individual country. The background to this is essentially that airports are needed for maintaining competitiveness and connectivity. The problem is that in many cases, everybody wants one. How do we measure the economic benefits for a particular region, a particular area, to see whether it is worthwhile and how it will compete against other neighbouring airports within a national and an international system? We know that airport capacity is essential for maintaining and developing international links, but that capacity depends on the number of aircraft movements, the size of the planes, the turnaround times, and the passenger handling. How big does an airport need to be effective? How small can it be to still have a particular importance? Recognizing that airports also have negative impacts through land take, through noise, through emissions, and particularly, of course, the landside access issues. These are often more significant in terms of creating harm, environmental harm, to a locality than the airport itself. So how do we weigh the overall benefits, the detailed design and planning, and the environmental impacts to make rational decisions on airport development? Let me sort of set the scene with this. Evaluation or appraisal needs a very clear statement of the problem and the constraints on any solutions. And too often, even with very large infrastructure projects, there is a failure to identify precisely what the problem is to which the proposed development is a solution. Is it that you don't have good access to airports, or is it just simply that it would be nicer to have one a bit closer? And how does that relate to these other factors that need to come in? And of course, that depends on the types of traffic. Is the traffic going to be national or international traffic? In smaller countries like Portugal or the United Kingdom, then national traffic is not going to be so significant. Different, for example, from a country as large as the United States. And also the balance between passenger traffic and freight traffic. Does it make more sense to develop a local hub for freight traffic with the effects of those developments it can have on it? Is the airport going to have the potential to be a hub airport, or is it, as a local airport very often is, just simply serving point-to-point destinations? And in that case, which are the relevant points? Is it just simply going to feed into a hub somewhere, or is it going to develop inter-regional connections, both nationally and internationally? There are going to be many constraints on the location of such an airport. There are going to be aviation constraints. If you're too close to another airport, then there's going to be potential air traffic control problems in terms of separating out streams of traffic. There are problems of access and connectivity. Is this an airport that can be served easily by existing roads and railways? Is it possible, for example, for the nearby railway can have an airport-related station built into it so that increases the connectivity? And what local planning constraints are there? Are there problems in putting something as large as an airport close to sensitive environmental factors, close to housing, and so on? And of course, there are going to be financial and organizational constraints. Who is going to be responsible for it? Is this something that's going to be developed by private capital, or is it something that's going to be developed by a local or regional authority? Where's the finance coming from? Are there going to be available grants from national or international bodies to help facilitate this as a means of increasing connectivity to regions that are not as well connected? And then what sort of airport? Is this a case where there is an existing small aviation facility which can be developed in order to serve a particular region more effectively? And that's often the way that small regional airports develop. Or is this about identifying a completely new facility? And is this adding capacity to a network of connected airports serving a variety of regions? And is that something that's being developed as a national framework for aviation, or is this an attempt simply to try and develop something on the part of an individual region or city? We know that existing airports are going to have a range of linked activities, landside connections, but they may face serious constraints on both runway and terminal capacity. And this is often faced by a lot of regional airports. How far can they develop in order to be able to meet the needs of more advanced aircraft, or how can they develop in order to try and develop a larger capture area that they can serve? A new airport designed from scratch is probably going to be more efficient, but inevitably takes a large land take and the creation of new landside connectivity while imposing costs on linked activities. There is often a temptation to think that the development of a new airport would be a good thing to do because it can be developed from scratch without having to be fitted into an existing framework with that. But it involves considerable difficulty. For example, the idea of developing airports offshore, developing airports that are in a river estuary, for example. These are the sorts of things that have been considered, for example, in connection with development of airport capacity in the United Kingdom. Development of a network of airports seems to be potentially attractive in that you can provide an airport that's relatively close to population in a range of different destinations. But the problem then is, will that airport have a sufficient number of easily available destinations to make it attractive both to airlines and to passengers and residents? And the need to evaluate the benefits and costs of each option. Ultimately, considering whose decision is it going to be to take that? Is it the local authority? Is it going to be something that's going to have to be dealt with at a national level? So what are the elements that are involved in an appraisal with this? Well, the normal way of doing this in a sort of cost-benefit type framework is to think about the user benefits. Those are the airlines gain revenue and profitability, customers gain time savings, and that can be different between domestic and international flights. The problem with international flights is that that creates benefits to non-residents and to foreign airlines, and that may lead to leakages. So you've got to think carefully about where those benefits will eventually reside. There are, of course, a lot of non-user benefits and costs, particularly the costs that I've already suggested, environmental costs and so on, to airport neighbours, to users of affected land transport. But there are also some benefits. The improvements to land transport that may come from the airport being a destination for a new set of passengers may, for example, increase frequency on a local rail network. And of course, there are the negative impacts of noise pollution and the impact, positive and negative, on land values. But then we go beyond that and think, what are the induced effects that they're going to have? A new airport or a developed airport is going to have employment and investment effects in landside activities, as well as the direct employment, and the airport activities are going to cluster around the airport because it's there. At least that is what one would hope would happen. And then there are what we call the wider economic impacts, the effect that this will have on agglomeration and the enhancement of productivity, the impacts on wider investment, the impacts on tax take. Increased economic activity boosts government revenue and can help to pay for some of the developments, and the effects that derive when you have imperfect competition in markets that use the airport, that lead to output change and so on, and ultimately to dynamic impacts and land use, the long-term changes to territorial development. Can the development of an airport be used as a rebalancing of the economy to enhance the economy of an otherwise lagging region? And those are the ones that are much more difficult to assess. I've taken this diagram from work of the Airports Commission that was looking at the effects of the increasing runway capacity in the UK, particularly in the London area, and that shows quite clearly the impacts in terms of direct impacts and the wider economy and productivity from a whole range of things, including the important thing that's often been considered in the context of the UK, where an airport becomes a hub airport, that it increases the available frequencies and destinations because you're serving both a local market and an international market, with passengers coming in and interlining and moving on to other areas. And that gives a benefit to the local population as a result of that. And there are also issues like the gains from trade, from agglomeration and clustering, the effects on foreign direct investment, on tourism, and other dynamic impacts. And that's just a sort of useful summary of what I've just been suggesting. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the wider economic impacts, because it's something that we've recognized as being very important in terms of the evaluation of any transport investment, whether it be in roads, railways, or airports. And essential wider economic impacts arise from the fact that there are market failures in markets affected by a transport improvement. If there is perfect competition, no market failure, then prices are equal to marginal cost everywhere, and you will capture all of the benefits simply by the benefits that go to users, because prices are equal to marginal costs. But when there is imperfect competition, due to a small number of firms in the market, due to barriers to entry, due to the existence of market power, price will not be equal to marginal cost. And therefore, there is not going to be a direct transfer through from any change in the transport cost to the measurement of the benefits that come through. Externalities, which might exist, means that social cost deviates from private cost, and there will be tax distortions through impact on investment decisions and labour supply decisions. All of these mean that there is a possibility of the benefits that are not being counted in a traditional simple cost benefit analysis. And that leads through to things like product variety, where you get imperfect competition. You can get a greater variety as a result of better transport facilities available in a market, which leads to an increase in welfare. And in labour markets, there are effects both on the search and matching effect, which affects the level of frictional unemployment, and also on wage rigidities, which affects the degree of structural unemployment. All of those effects are additional potential benefits that can derive from a major investment. So that's the market failure aspect. Perhaps even more important is the effect that it has on productivity through agglomeration. And this is because we're needing to move from what is traditionally the position in a cost-benefit analysis, which tends to assume that there is a partial equilibrium solution. We only look at the individual markets rather than looking on the way that things ripple through a set of markets, which you would do in a general equilibrium approach. And that leads to things like induced investment, dependent developments, the output change in imperfectly competitive markets. Maybe that suggests a 10% benefit uplift on average across markets, though there may well be important sectoral and regional variations in this. In terms of employment, labour supply, the move to more, or in some cases less productive jobs, that will also have an effect on the overall benefits that comes. If the improvement in transport enables a better sorting, and that can include, of course, air transport, because it means that if you've got an available local airport, that becomes attractive to firms to develop activities there and to have and to attract staff to a location that has good connectivity and accessibility. And the agglomeration impacts that have effect here. As you improve connectivity, then cities have a tendency to grow. The growth of cities will lead to the agglomeration of industries, and that will lead to the potential of increases in productivity. And roughly speaking, on average across all sectors, we think there's about a 5% enhancement to productivity as a result of this, though there are huge variations across different sectors. Not only across sectors, but also across skills, because if you've got very good, easy communication between cities, then firms can effectively concentrate certain of their activities. Put all of your accountants in one location and all of your marketing people in another location to take advantage of the externalities in labour markets in those locations and still have good connectivity between them. So wider economic impacts derive from the existence of market imperfections, but also from the benefits to productivity. And of course, these can occur at the national or international level. Some of the benefits will leak out and go to international travellers and firms, but that may be beneficial because they will increase inward investment. International hub activities improve accessibility for domestic travellers, and so that would be also beneficial if you've got more locations that can be served. And there are trade gains from connectivity, but also potential leakages. And of course, the interesting thing here is the way that globally markets have been changing. The traditional dominance of transatlantic markets and European markets, which has particularly been important for the United Kingdom, has changed the growth of emerging markets, China and the Middle East, African and Latin American markets. And here, of course, certain countries have advantages in particular directions. For the UK, for example, it has traditionally been the transatlantic links that mean that we have a very high frequency of services there, rather less to Africa and Latin America, which of course are likely to be more beneficial to countries like Portugal and Spain and to locations within those countries. But also the local and regional impacts. The existence of direct flights, the delay that's involved in getting to airports can sometimes be the major problem that is involved, particularly if it involves transport by road or rail, when there may well be delays. I mean, just to put it personally, where I live in Canterbury in southeast England, I'm about 110 kilometres from Heathrow Airport. If I drive, it will take me, if the roads are clear, just under an hour and a half to be able to drive that on motorways. But I can never rely on it being that. The average time it takes is 2 hours, and it can take up to 3.5 hours if the traffic is badly congested. I can go by train, and if everything works well, because it involves connections in London, then I can do it in 2 hours. But if it doesn't go so well, then again, it can take 2 to 3 hours. So you have to build in a very substantial buffer to be able to ensure that you get to an airport on time. And that's because my nearest available airport happens to be one of the large London airports. If I had a local airport that would also give me connectivity, then that would be better. It might be a local airport, a local regional airport, that would give me a direct access to a hub airport. There was an attempt to develop a local airport near where I live, which is only about 20 minutes away, that would have a direct flight to Amsterdam, and therefore they could use Amsterdam as the hub airport. But then if there is a delay to that flight, you've got the same problem that you've got with the access, the land access to the airport. So there is a problem that's involved in terms of that. Airport access needs to be integrated into the local transport system. There's no good developing an airport without adequate transport links to it, including, importantly, public transport links, because of the need to try and reduce the amount of traffic that is on the, for example, on the roads close to that, and also the importance of seeing how air and rail can be important complements to this. Where high-speed rail lines serve airports, they can suppress the need for a number of shorter distance flight movements and provide good connectivity in that way to a wider range of destinations. And does it change location preferences for business? So those are the sorts of questions that we've got with this. And the spatial impacts are about the catchment areas of these airports. How big does the airport need to be in order to be able to develop a sufficient range of flights that are going to be attractive to a sufficient range of people within the catchment area? And of course, typically what we will find is that catchment areas overlap, and that will bear airports can serve different markets. I'll talk about in just a moment. The thought in one of the thoughts in the development of runway capacity in southeast England was the extent to which the two major airports, Heathrow and Gatwick, could actually serve markets in different directions. So that Heathrow could serve markets to the west, the transatlantic market, and Gatwick could serve markets to the south and east, the European markets, and maybe some of the more long distance ones into the Middle East and so on. But of course, the problem is that people also want to use one of the London airports as a means of interlining between a flight from a US origin onward to a further destination. And that would mean that you would have problems of actually getting between the two airports in question. And that raises additional problems about land transport and so on. Agglomeration effects often have fairly steep distance decay. Maybe in the range of 30 to 50 kilometers, you don't get much benefit beyond that because the distance is too great. And of course, there are sort of shadow effects that develop. So are there potential sort of sweet spots in overlapping catchment areas where it would be possible to develop a sizable regional airport? Let me put this into context in the case of what was being thought of in terms of the developments in London. London clearly dominates UK aviation. 61% of all traffic through UK airports goes through the 5 London airports, and Heathrow has 29%, almost a third of total UK traffic. Only Manchester, Birmingham and Edinburgh of the other airports in the UK carry over 10 million passengers. And of those, I mean, Birmingham is only 160 kilometres from Heathrow, Manchester just under 250, Edinburgh just under 550. So only really Edinburgh is well outside the catchment area for land transport to Heathrow. And I've noted there the 5 London airports: Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, and London City, all of which are relatively constrained. They're all one runway airports except for Heathrow, which has 2 runways. But Heathrow is one of the largest airports in the world in terms of passengers, with around 80 million passengers a year. So if we look at this, you can see the extent to which it's quite difficult to develop large airports, even in fairly large cities in the UK. I've listed here all of the airports that have got over 1 million passengers a year. You can see here the domination of Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, and Luton, which are the 4 of the 5 London airports. London City is relatively small, and only Manchester creeps into that area. Edinburgh and Birmingham are much closer, 10 to 15 million passengers a year. And then cities like Bristol, Glasgow, Newcastle, Liverpool, Leeds, Bradford, and the East Midlands and Aberdeen are very, very much smaller and serving much more constrained local markets from that. So you can see when you've got a very big airport that it dominates, and you see the development here of traffic in those London airports since the year 2000. You can see that, yes, City Airport is relatively small in terms of that. Big fall, of course, during COVID, but we're back up to, these are the 2023 figures. I haven't got the full 2024 figures yet. We're back up to around that 80 million mark, which puts Heathrow as a very large airport. But the second airport, Gatwick, was approaching 50 million passengers a year on a single runway airport before that. So you can see the extent to which these London airports overshadow the development of regional airports because they are so large and because they have the hub effect. And just an example here, the overlap of the London airport catchment areas, you can see the extent here to which you've got access to how many airports from various places around the southeast region. Canterbury here is where I live. We've got access within 90 minutes to 2 of the airports, but it's only this sort of little group of airports here, the group of regions here, that have access to all of the airports within a 90-minute time. And even if we look just at Heathrow and Gatwick, we can see here this is looking at a 45-minute catchment area. There is a very small band of areas that have got access to both of those airports within 45 minutes. Most of them are, as it were, captive, but then you've got to look at the range of flights that are available to different destinations from each of those in order to be able to decide what the degree of accessibility is. The attempt to think what was the best scheme to develop in the UK looked at 2 options for extending the runways at Heathrow, and new runway, or an extended runway that served as 2 runways, the second runway at Gatwick. And what you can see here is the extent to which, both in terms of the direct economic benefits, the direct benefits to consumers from that development, and also the wider economic impact, showed that the bigger airport with a bigger development, even though it was more expensive, was going to be the best solution to this because of those agglomeration effects and wider economic benefits from that. So it becomes actually quite difficult to justify the development in smaller airports when they are under some sort of shadow from the larger airport. And that is a real problem, I think, for the development of regional airports. So let me draw some conclusions from this. it's clear that large hub airports probably maximize the total benefits, but they do it at a cost. They have a very big footprint in terms of noise and the creation of traffic and so on around them. And smaller regional airports will suffer from the shadow effect of large hubs. What's the distance which it becomes feasible? Probably 2 hours. So it's only where you get a relatively large conurbation like Birmingham that it can actually compete to some extent with Heathrow. But you could see from those earlier figures that it's only really Manchester that is just about far enough from London to be able to get away from the effect and have a range of destinations that makes it really attractive. The idea of developing networks of airports which can interrelate with each other sounds attractive in dispersing the negative impacts and maximizing local accessibilities, but it's probably inefficient because they're probably none of them really big enough to be able to create the advantage. And that's a real difficulty in terms of balancing regional interests with what is the most effective from a national airport strategy point of view. But at the end of this, aviation needs to be part of an integrated transport plan. What is the best solution to the problem? Is it better to develop, for example, high-speed rail in order to provide links between cities and the major airport, rather than developing a much wider range of small airports, which will not be able to maintain the degree of range of destinations that's important? And competition between airports, including international competition. The study for the London airports was very cognizant of the fact that it was not just about London competing between the London airports and between other airports in the UK, but competition with Paris, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt in particular was being seen as very, very significant in terms of particularly developing the range of destinations to some of the newer markets that were involved. And in terms of that, therefore, not only collaboration between airports, and it's quite interesting to know that, I mean, for quite a long time, although it's reduced its holding now, the investment in Heathrow Airport, which is not publicly owned, but is privately owned, was being done by Spanish infrastructure investors. And of course, the tie-up between British Airways and Iberia was seen as very significant in terms of developing the range of destinations that will be available, for which each airline was more specialized, with Iberia being able to develop the routes to Latin America, whilst British Airways concentrated on the transatlantic routes to North America. And those sorts of tie-ups, both between airlines and between airports, are very significant. But in terms of thinking about individual developments, it's clear that modeling needs a general equilibrium approach. Most appraisal tends to be done traditionally on a partial equilibrium approach. And unless we can actually see the way in which the development of any transport project affects all markets, we will not get a full picture. But of course, I go back to the point where I started in terms of this. Any decision depends on defining very clearly what the objective of any development is. It's not just relying on a single number in terms of a rate of an assumed rate of return or something like that. A key objective may well be to think about the way that an airport development for a particular region may provide benefits that are over and above anything that can be easily measured in terms of both the direct and the wider economic impacts. It may be a very significant statement for the development of a more remote region. So I hope that has given a useful overview of some of the economic impacts that I think are important in terms of this. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Roger, for this extensive analytical perspective over this wicked problems, I would say, and that bring a rather multidisciplinary perspective. So if there is no burning questions, I would suggest that we will first listen to the industry and then we will open a period of discussion, because I think it will be more interesting if we have the two perspectives over the table before we start the discussion. And so it seems that there are no burning questions. Okay. So then I would invite the next speaker, who is Henry Charles Ozarowski, who is someone very experienced in the aeronautical environment. He is a master and a PhD from the Imperial College. He has been director of fleet from Flybe company, and is currently the head of strategy, network and partnership of TAP Air Portugal. So, Henry, the floor is yours.
So, what I've decided to do for you today is show you a presentation that gives you an overview of how we think about routes. Is it not? Try. It needs a second to. So, initially I thought I'd do a network and strategy 101, but actually what I'm going to do today is basically explain to you how we think about everything Roger talked about, and actually explain to you how we manage risk and manage growth and create a customer perspective, which basically allows you to go on Expedia and buy a ticket and feel like you're getting value for money. I haven't started yet. Just explaining, it's coming. So I always do that. If I start going, people focus right away on so the first thing I want to do is tell you a little story. Before you decide to choose routes, and before you ever decide to choose an airport and understand how airports need to work with you, you have to fundamentally understand what your strategy is. Once you understand what your strategy is, then you go to level 2, 3, and 4 is to understand how what you want to do at an airport or with an airport or through an airport fits in to either create a unique destination, a growth in an existing destination, or something that's different to what you do.
You need the microphone because
so yes. Okay. Right. So let's start with the very fundamentals, which is what makes TAP work. And if you think about it, this slide is very, very simple. And the secret to any success, it's right here, it's the same. It is, don't worry. I can see it sharing. So one of the things that's really important is to understand the fundamentals, because once you do that, we do the same with airports. We have meetings 3 times a year, and we speak with airports and we discuss with them what it would take to either fly there, fly more, or think about it in the future. And if you're very clear in your head on what your strategy is, then what you can do after is overlay that with your discussions. So our raison d'être, as we call it, is we focus on 4 core areas: Brazil, North America, West and Central Africa, and the islands, and of course, Portugal. And what we do is we try and provide us a product which is effective, attractive to the customer so that he feels like he understands why he wants to choose TAP, and that's really important. And the final thing is you want to be competitive against the other guys that offer the same thing as you, because as you know, it's the same in every industry, whether it's cars, whether it's clothes, there's always 10, 15 different alternatives. And you want someone to feel like, I'm really getting good value for money by flying with a certain airline. So this is what the end game looks like. So this is a chart where at the top you have all the departures out of Lisbon, and at the bottom you have all the arrivals. And it's exactly like a blockchain. It's very nonlinear. People come in and they go out, and you have to focus on what works from the bottom to the top, so that when a little flight, let's say, I'll point it with my little mouse, Bilbao arrives, it's connecting to all these red and yellows, which is your long haul. Because the guy is not going to go Bilbao, Lisbon, Lisbon, Porto. He's probably going to drive. What this is a map that tells you what is my raison d'être and what's the outcome of my raison d'être. So how do you get to this point? And this is really important. Well, you have to, like I said, focus on what makes you better than other people. And what makes us really strong is our geographical position. Now, it's not just a geographical position to everywhere in the world, but it's the important flows that we focus on. And I'll explain to you why. Whether it's Brazil, whether it's North America or Africa, our geographical position works very, very well for very different types of flows. For example, if you're sitting in Rome, going through Lisbon to New York is a direct line of sight. It's very easy. If you're sitting in Brazil or Caracas, pretty much anywhere through Lisbon is the direct line of sight. So it's the quickest, most efficient way of getting there. And most efficient is very important because it means it costs us less money. It's the same with Africa. If you're sitting in Accra, unless you fly direct to Washington, your second most efficient point is through Lisbon. It's right at the tip. So it actually works very well. And people don't think about that. So what we try and do is we take 15,000 nonlinear points and we put it together and we create a blockchain effectively. So that's what we do. And of course, sorry, one last thing. You always focus on your cultural ties because you have a competitive advantage. If the guy who's coming from Curitiba sits on a tap plane, he feels very, very good that everybody around him speaks Portuguese. And that's really important to them. You'd underestimate how much that's important, but it's really, really true. So I drew up a little chart to show you the importance of, firstly, your core starting point is your home market. And our home market is Portugal. So everything you do when you design, when you speak to airports, is think about what is important about Portugal that I should have a conversation with you. So he was talking about a small airport, let's say Birmingham. So I had a meeting with Birmingham about 4 months ago. And the first thing they said, oh, we see all this catchment area, we see all these markets, we see all these addresses, all these passports, and we can see that there's a huge amount of leakage. And I said, yes. So they were thinking, well, we'd really like you to consider flying. I said, okay, but I have a problem. He said, what? I said, well, my airport's full. So if I decide to fly to Birmingham, I have to give up on something else. So what makes you more important than, let's say, a Heathrow or a Manchester or an Ireland? And these are the very difficult decisions we take day by day. And as you can see, if you look on this chart, what this is showing you is the rate of growth versus pre-COVID. So how much we grew versus pre-COVID and how big we are. This is Europe to Europe. And if you look at this, this is quite remarkable. If you think about how many people live in France, there's 70 million people in France, and Portugal only has about 8 to 10. We're literally maybe less than half they are, but we offer so many more seats in Europe, which makes Portugal incredibly popular. So if you now understand the graph, this is the kind of unpopular, not doing so well, really popular, doing so well. For such a, I don't want to say small, but such a smaller country versus the others, Portugal in the world really stands out. So that's your starting point. It's a huge competitive advantage because at the end of the day, wherever you fly, whether it's Birmingham, whether it's Manaus, whether it's LA, you have to have a strong home market. And then from there, you leverage on all these points through what's called a halo effect to create a very strong network. And that's what we do. So if you look at, I literally did this morning. If you look at the tourism growth in Portugal, there's only one competitor versus us. It's pretty much Spain. And these are the big markets we're looking at. The rest are struggling a lot. And what we're seeing generally is the trend is Southern Europe is very, very important, which, as we talked about in the beginning, is perfect for the line of sight of Lisbon. Great. So we need to work on that. If I look at the tourism of arrival by country and you go back historically, you can see that it's not a short-term thing. It's a very long-term thing. Again, thinking about, I'm going to speak to my Birmingham airport. I'm going to speak to my East Midlands. I'm going to speak to my Carcassonne. I'm going to speak to my Copenhagen. I'm going to try and discuss what makes it valuable to work with this airport and where are those people coming from. First, again, you start with your strategy. What is my clear strategy? Then why do I want to fly somewhere? How does it help the rest of the network? How does it reinforce everything and create a halo effect? The top sources market are on the right: Spain, UK, France, Germany, Brazil, US, Italy, Netherlands. Those are all very important markets. And you can see it's working. A lot of people are coming from all of those markets. So what's our short haul strategy? That's the important thing. So you have to divide this into two, right? You have the big planes that fly really far, and then you have the small planes that fly very short. And they're both really important. Again, without sounding like a parrot, it's a halo effect. It's a blockchain. Everything has to feed on everything. So we serve the local market. We have obviously business travelers, the guys who go to Madrid. That's why we fly 10 times a day. They really want to know, I need to fly at 8 a.m. because I have to be at a meeting at 9:30. It's the same for Brussels. It's the same for London. At the same time, we have those people who say, I need to connect with the long haul, and I need to make it convenient so that people don't feel like they're flying at 3 a.m, they're exhausted, and they get there and they waste a whole day doing business meetings. So everything is about convenience for every person. Again, it's very nonlinear. The needs of these two can be in tension, and sometimes we have very difficult decisions to make, which is unfortunately financially, to say which one generates what I call the highest return on capital employed. The capital is your airplanes. You have to maximize their usage day by day. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when you look at all the biggest places that we fly in Europe, particularly out of Lisbon, and we'll use Lisbon as an example, you can see that we're pretty much present on most of them. And some of the ones where we're not present are either because it's very difficult to penetrate and you're asking for trouble, or it's so small that you don't really need it. Or the final thing is, it's so close to another airport, to the existing point, that you don't really need to do it. So let me give you an example of the last one. I used to live in Cologne when I worked for Lufthansa. You look at Cologne, it's right there. It's that little thing right here. We don't need to fly to Cologne because we fly to Düsseldorf. Düsseldorf is an hour train ride away. It's €7 by train, and it pretty much encompasses the same catchment area. Actually, the richer population is in Düsseldorf, not in Cologne. Cologne is okay, more studenty, but it's much better for our catchment area and the quality of our revenues to fly out of Düsseldorf. And in fact, we do get people from Cologne taking a train up to Düsseldorf and flying us directly. So it works. So the question is, would I have rather flown Düsseldorf or Cologne? Düsseldorf. And there are many reasons why. Let's take another one. Istanbul. Well, Istanbul is a very difficult market. It's a very big market. It's something we're always looking at. But our biggest Star Alliance partner, and we'll talk about partnerships, are flying there. And they're flying twice a day. We pretty much what's called code share. So we market our flights on their name and they market their flights on our name. So virtually, we actually offer Istanbul. If you go on our website, you can buy a TAP ticket to Istanbul without doing anything. So if I already have those resources allocated through Turkish and they do a really great job and they fly twice a day and they feed pretty much all day into our points, why should I waste more resource doing that when I have many other things to do and the airport is full? Great. Tick the box. We talked about the airport. We talked about. Final example is something like an Edinburgh. Well, Edinburgh is a bit tricky. Edinburgh has both EasyJet and Ryanair. And as you know, they're very, very, very good at what they do. They're probably the best low cost in the world. Do I want to start a fight with two Goliaths like that just for the sake of trying to penetrate a market? Not sure. It's one of those maybes. What I probably want to do is I want to focus on fixing TAP, making consistency, creating a great brand image, just like an Emirates, just like a Singapore, so that when I enter the market one day, people are very excited, and then you have a good chance of winning it. Plus, you combine that with a long haul, which is what I do half the time, then you have a much better chance. So everything is about patience. It's very interesting. It's a whole, if you like chess, it's a great chess game. All right, so let's move on. So as I talked about, some markets are long haul feeders. They're big, they're huge. People fly all over the place and we offer many destinations. Take an example of Paris. 50% of our flight, and I'll show you after, connects to other places in the world. It's quite remarkable. So the guy sitting next to you, chances are 50-50. He's going to Florianopolis, Porto Alegre, New York, Washington, and it works. It's not far away getting through Lisbon to the other way. There are other markets like, if you go to the top, it's Sweden, Stockholm. Anybody guess? How many hubs can you go through before you get to Lisbon? Anybody? Give me a number. How many airline hubs do you have before you get to Lisbon from Stockholm? Off the top of your head. Try 8. Zurich, Munich, Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris. So you've got 8 different walls that you can get through before you get to Lisbon. What's the probability mathematically that he's going to pick you? It's a game probably minimal, right? So you need to focus on your core. So there's always a probability that he will choose you, but it's not your core competency. It's not your right to win, as you see. So if you focus on that, you always offer it, you design it with it, but you make sure you focus on what makes you the most money. And if that works, then you make it sustainable, and that's critical. Longevity, return on capital employed, sustainability, and as I said in the beginning, keeping things simple. And then you add complexity as you do it. So moving on to long haul strategy. So we're very clear when we want to fly short haul. Now we need these things to come in and either have a role for Portugal or have a role for the long haul. And that's what we do. We look at the North America demand. We focus on Southern Europe, and I'll explain to you why in a second. We talked about geographical location to Africa and to Brazil. Africa is very good. A lot of the Luandan, Mozambican, Accra, Guinea, Guinea-Conakry, perfectly aligned with Lisbon to North America, to Washington, for example, big, and New York for the UN, very important. We create our room to grow. So you never design everything fully to the end, but you create it in such a way that you can add bits and bobs during the day so that there's always more itineraries that people want when you get full. And you use your partnerships. That's really important. You can't fly everywhere. You can't be everywhere. We talked about Turkish Airlines. They offer a virtual network and they make us look bigger virtually. That's very important. And of course, the last piece that Roger talked about before is cargo. Cargo is very important because it's the icing on the cake. Cargo doesn't think about time. It can make 6 stops. As long as it's a direct line of sight, it's very happy it gets there. It doesn't complain, doesn't need a toilet. You know, it's just under the plane, relaxing, doing its thing. Jokes aside, it really is that way. We use every cargo space we have, and it's very relaxed, and it's great money. It's really great money. And it's very efficient if you do it right. So here's a really cool chart. It gives you an idea. We're going to get deeper and deeper. I'm going to make it more complicated because then it becomes a bit of a PhD after a while, but we'll keep it quite simple. This is a bubble chart of demand, okay? It physically tells you for each flag how many people are going to Sao Paulo, Rio, Belo Horizonte, Recife, Brasilia, Fortaleza, and you can go down the list. So you have to take these decisions, right? You have to decide, I need to fly to some of these Brazilian places. I need to make sure I capture all of those European places because I need it to create a halo effect, right? How do I do that? You have conversations with airports, you figure out catchment areas, you figure out where people live, you use their postcodes, you bring everything together, and then you hope it all works out. Most of the time it does. That's why you have to do a risk analysis. So as you can see, it's pretty nonlinear. And then there's this other tail called rest of Europe. That's the other 500 places we haven't talked about that people fly to. So it can be quite complex, right? And then you haven't even talked about time of day, day of week, month, year, seasonality, wars. Look what's happening in Mozambique. Look what's happening in Angola with the Kwanzas. Look what's happening in Brazil right now. There's one-directional traffic. We're seeing a lot of more one-directional traffic. So a lot of people are going from Brazil to Europe, and many few people are flying back to Brazil for reasons you understand. It's very difficult. So we have to manage all that. And we have to create, as we started with, a consistent product because at the end of the day, when you go on the app, why is my 7 p.m. flight not showing anymore? We get so many of these, you can't imagine. And by the way, we need to make money. That's a tough one, huh? So let's talk about our core. We talked about Brazil. Many people forget how big Brazil is. If you look at that little map on the right, you can see how large Brazil is. It's the size of the United States. It's huge. I remember I flew just now from Bogota to Guarulhos. It took me 6 hours. It's crazy, isn't it? 6 hours to fly from one end to the other. It's incredible. if we do the math right, if we do the thinking right, if we do the strategy right, you can see that Lisbon is at the top because it's perfectly located geographically. But it's not just the geography, it's the halo effect. And I'm going to show you why. This chart's a bit complicated, but I'm going to make it really simple for you. Imagine that I could tell you all the demand from Europe to Brazil. You need Sao Paulo, you need Rio, you need Fortaleza, you need Salvador below, and you pretty much get to 100% of where everybody's going to Brazil from Europe. Same thing from Europe to Brazil. Same thing. Take a second to remember what I showed you in the beginning in short haul. Do you remember we showed you all of those points that are important for Lisbon? Paris, London, Rome, Madrid. That is your blockchain. Everything feeds on everything. That's why it works. It's not pure luck. It's nonlinear mathematics. Does that make sense? But now try and put a schedule together where everything fits together. That's where my colleague Duarte has a big headache because he used to be the head of ops. He's now our head of ops strategy. And we basically have to work together to make this work in real life and deliver people's bags and feed them on board and make sure they get there on time. It's pretty tricky. Now, Southern Europe is a bit different for North America because if you're sitting in Warsaw, if you think about it, it looks straight, but the Earth actually isn't round that way. The Earth is round this way, right? If you think about it. So if you go that way down and that way up, you're actually doing quite a big detour. But you don't think about it. You need to look at a globe and see the globe as its circular reference. So one of the things we do very differently than what we did before, and this is why it's important when you're talking to airports like Warsaw, is say, I'm not here to offer you North America. I'm here to offer you Brazil and Portugal. And it works very well. And if you do that, you can see the green zone is your core. It's your right to win. Your yellow zone, you do quite well. Your red zone, it's really difficult. It's quite far to go around. But the secret to the sauce is you never close the offering. You just offer it at a more expensive price because when you get to the summer, everybody gets really full. And if someone needs to go somewhere, they're going to take whatever itinerary they can fly in, and they're going to pay whatever price. And that's where you get the icing on the cake. So we always design it for what if, but not absolutely. And that's the difference in strategy. You have to focus on your core strategy on what you need to have versus what is nice to have. Same with Africa. You focus on your core and you make sure you know where your right to win is. Cultural ties. We have to be the best in Rwanda. We have to be the best in Mozambique. We have to do well in Cabo Verde, in Saint-Tome. Accra as well. We have a lot of, you'd be surprised how many ties we have indirectly. If you focus on your core, you have a very good chance of doing well. And that's the criticality of it. And this is important when you're having the conversations with the airports, because then you need to understand why you're doing well, where those people come from, where the postcodes are from, and what makes it a success to offer a certain time at a given time and day. So the final secret is these new little airplanes called 321 LRs. They're not big planes. They don't have what's called two aisles, wide bodies as we call them. They have single aisles. Airplanes have become so efficient now that we can fly those things pretty much transatlantic safely as we do already. And we fly it exactly, roughly a few percentage apart at the same seat cost as a big plane, which means you can fly two small planes or a big plane, and you can offer twice as much product to someone as they did before. Take New York, for example. You could either fly one flight at 2 p.m., or you could say, you know what? I'm going to give you a 2 p.m. flight, or I'm going to give you a 6 p.m. flight. And then people have the choice. If you look on Expedia, when people have choice, you're more likely in a game of probability to win, right? Simple statistical mathematics. That's what we do all day. We find ways to create advantages efficiently. And you can see when you look at the range circles, there's quite a few places we can choose from. So it's good. So this is very interesting. There's actually, Roger was showing you some slides before on travel time. I took 3 different travel times for you to show you the importance of why we think of it. The top one is London. The one in the middle is Milano. And the bottom one is New York and New Jersey. You'll forgive me, I don't want to necessarily talk about Portugal for legal reasons. I think I'm going to stay out of the politics of what's going on right now. But I think it'll be very interesting to talk about this. So I grew up in New York. My mother's French, my father's English, but I was an American when I started my life. So I took 1 hour and 10 minutes driving time. The red one is actually not New York, it's Philadelphia Airport. The second one is New Jersey, which you know is where most of the Portuguese diaspora actually moved to. And the third one is that little blue one is JFK. So actually you can see in 1 hour, 10 minutes, there's huge amounts of overlap. But the difference with New York and the rest is there's something massive in the middle called New York City. That's the difference. That's why everybody stays on each other's side, and it's very important. So you ask a person living in Manhattan, where do I want to go? He said, I'll pick New Jersey or I'll pick New York. It doesn't matter to me. They're both 40 minutes away. But if the guy who lives in the Hamptons right here says, I need to get to the airport, he's not going to go to New Jersey. He's going to go to JFK. This is why when we think about where we fly, we do take into account travel time. We do take into account diaspora. We do take into account traffic. We do take into account the corporate market, and we do a lot of work behind everything we do. It's very difficult. I don't want you to think it's easy. And then when we decide that we're going to do it, we put our neck on the line, our personal responsibilities, that every time we fly back and forth, let's say to Brazil, it's pretty much the price of a house. So imagine how much money we put on the line. It's very, very risky. So we have to get it right. And we spend a lot of time iterating. We don't just do one, we do 20, 30 different iterations. And of course, we have 6 backup plans, not one. Take Greater London. We were talking about that before. 1 hour, 10 minutes. See how Gatwick and Heathrow overlap, but there's still quite a bit that doesn't. And it's very important because there's 10 million people in London and there's huge amounts of tourism. And now with the Elizabeth line and the Heathrow Express, travel all the way through has become easier. So actually you can get from here to here in 40 minutes now. It's incredible. All of these things play a role. But what plays more of a role as well is convenience now. To his point before, if you're at Heathrow, and we just did this piece of work for Star Lines, there was thousands of one-stop destinations you can fly directly from at Heathrow Airport if you're flying on Star Lines. You can fly one stop to pretty much 80% of the world. It's incredible, right? It's one of those things that people take for granted, but it's an incredibly powerful thing because not only does it make the world more efficient, it makes it closer. It brings us closer together technology-wise to share knowledge, to provide help, to provide safeguards, to provide a balanced approach to everything in life. And I think it's really important. Milan's a little bit of a different story, which is why it was a big fight. You can see the overlap is much larger, which is why every time guys like Ryanair and EasyJet add capacity, we feel the pain very quickly, which is why we have to fight and make sure whatever airport we choose, we put in 7 frequencies a day. People ask me all the time, why do you fly 7 times a day in Milan? Because I want to be the best. I need the person to say, TAP is the best. I can fly anytime I want. I can change my ticket easily. Sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it's cheap, but at least I know I'm getting value from it and they protect me. When I have a problem, I know they're there. Next flight or next day or hotel. I always feel that security, right? And a lot of people have that. So moving on, I'm going to show you this again. At first, you're like, what is this mess? Imagine all of these different flights. Now it kind of makes sense, right? You have your short haul, you have your long haul, everything works as a blockchain together. You have different times of the day. You see the yellow bits, that's the long haul. You have one yellow bit, then you have a second yellow bit. Sometimes you have 2 of the same flights in one. Sometimes you have 1 in each. And you want to make this efficiency work for everybody because sustainability and efficiency and making money and making the customer happy are at the core values of what we do. And we have to make sure we have a lot of buffers everywhere. And that's what we do. So this is the final piece. I'm going to try and describe this to you. On the left is your long haul. You see at the top, Belém, Brasília, Confins. Then you have your North Americas. Then you have your Africa and Middle East. If it's green, it means it connects perfectly. If it's red, means not so much. So we don't worry so much, let's say, about a Tenerife to South America. That's not our core market. The guys aren't going Tenerife, Lisbon, Guarulhos. That's not our raison d'etre. You see, we focus on what we know makes us money and what's sustainable. And that's very important, especially when you're talking to airports. And that's how we choose airports. We look at long haul, we look at short haul, we look at diaspora, we look at driving distance, we look at corporates, we look at VFR, and we decide what works. And then we create the mix, which is what you're looking at here. This is all of the short haul. This is the point-to-points. This is the connecting. And you can see, although you think Madrid's not important, it's a massive revenue strain for TAP because it gives people alternatives in the same way that Iberia give you alternatives, right? Some people complain and they say, Iberia's cheaper than we are. Well, of course they are. You have to do a stop to go somewhere. It's less convenience. You're paying more for luxury of flying nonstop. That's the name of the game. And sometimes, once in a while, you get a good deal on the nonstop. Not always, but at the end of the day, we have to make money. It's very important. So we have all of these different values, and we're very clear on what our right to win is. And that's very important, especially when you're talking about airports and when you're thinking about where you want to fly and why certain airports are important, especially in a constrained airport where we don't have much choice and we have to be very particular on what we decide to do. Of course, we rely massively on our partners. We have over 100 plus partnerships all over the world, which means through one of our partners, you can pretty much fly anywhere around the world. Unless there's no traffic rights, you can pretty much be guaranteed that if you go to a travel agent and say, I want to end up in Chile, no problem. We have a connect partner through Guarulhos. Or I want to fly to Lake Tahoe and do some skiing there. Absolutely no problem through United. You have all of these different ways and mechanisms that create a virtual network through technology that make us look twice as big as what we really are, which is really good from a halo and a marketing point of view. And you can see, like, if you look at Azul and Gol as an example, when we go to Belo Horizonte, we have 37 places we can fly with Azul and then another 11 through Gol. It's the same in Sao Paulo. Gol give us another 60 places that we can fly through, which makes it great. And actually, some of those places are the same, so they feed off each other. If our flight to Guarulhos is full, some people fly via Belo Horizonte, which is actually quite efficient. So we're never wasting resources. It's always being used in some shape or form. And of course, the trains, very important. We have great intermodal partners. We work a lot with trains. You won't know this, but TAP is actually one of the most advanced in doing train relationships. We're trying to work with CP now. We're in the final stages of finishing the program, where pretty much half of the CP network is going to connect to TAP. It's very, very important from a sustainability point of view. And you can see, for example, with Deutsche Bahn, we have a huge network all over Germany, massive network. That pretty much means when you land in Frankfurt or Munich, you don't need to take another flight. You can just take a train. And they're perfectly positioned, especially when they're located in the airports, to traverse very quickly in an hour. Same with many more intermodal partners, as you can see on the map. We have Italy, we have Germany, we have Netherlands, we have UK, we have the North, Sweden. We're setting up Portugal. We're working with Spain. We're also working with Morocco. Morocco have great TGVs now. When you land in Casablanca, you can be in Tanger in 2 hours. It's only 30 euros. It's incredible. So one of our limiting factors, unfortunately, is not our ability to do it, but our ability to get them to connect to our systems so we can offer it to the consumer. That's always our problem. So when you go on our website now, it's completely seamless and it's remarkable. It's actually what works. So last but not least, how do we choose routes? I thought I'd show you the coolest new route that we have, Los Angeles. I'm sure everybody's heard that we've launched Los Angeles. It's going to be an incredibly good route for us. Did you know that last year we had 160 passengers each direction doing a one stop to get to Lisbon from LA? That means every day, 160 different people were flying via Vancouver, via Toronto, via New York, via Paris, via London, or via Madrid to get to Lisbon. It's pretty much the size of an airplane, right? So we've been monitoring it for several months. And what we did was we looked at all of the demand, which is here. So this is passengers per day each way. And you can see that LA was there. It was definitely there. And that was a few years ago. So this is older data. You'll forgive me if I don't show you the latest. But the point is, what's really important is the airport supports the demand, the core demand to Portugal. That's our raison d'etre, as I spoke to you about in the beginning. And the final bit is our partners. We have JetBlue and we have United. They're very, very good partners, because if we fly from Lisbon to LA, it could be that the guy's going to Lake Tahoe or going to San Francisco or going to San Diego. You want to offer all of those possible itineraries to someone so that you can create, again, the same word, a blockchain, a halo effect, and a way to push your market position more. That's pretty much what we do. And that's how we work with the thinking of the airports. I've tried to break it down very simply to you. You can imagine it's very complicated. We have thousands and thousands of data points that we look through daily. It's very nonlinear, but I hope you found it interesting.
Yes, so thank you very much. And Richard, it was a wonderful presentation, very insightful. I don't know, Roger, are you there? We cannot see you. Yes, it looks like you are there.
I'm here.
Okay, excellent. So now questions from the floor for these two presentations. So rather complementary, I would say, in the fact that one more focused on development and the role of the airport and of the air transport, the other more on the strategy and how to do it, how to make it happen. So yes, Gabriel, you can start. Yeah. Yeah, there is one there.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for both presentations. They were very interesting. So my question goes to the TAP. So my question is related to, do you do any models or like trying to understand the behavior of people on choosing TAP? And so what could, when you're doing the cost benefit analysis, what could be some factors that could make people not choose TAP or choose another company, for example? So I'll give you just an example. So when you talked about the small airplanes going to Brazil now, I once took that airplane. And in terms of comfort and even perception of safety, I think it's worse than the normal airplane. But this is not a factor that will make me not choose TAP the next time, because I want to go to Brazil, see my family, etc. So the fact that of being convenient for me, or being only 6-hour flight, this for me is the main factor in choosing to use TAP. And so are these, do you analyze these type of behavioral factors of the clients in order to make this market? And yeah, so thank you.
Yes, we absolutely do. We look at 150 different things. I mean, we start by, is there demand? You always start by, is it going to Lisbon? Is it going close to Lisbon? Is it in the line of sight? Then the second thing is, can I price so that the cost that I have to create to fly it is competitive with myself and with the market? So when you're doing the math, you do the math on how much does it cost to fly there? What kind of prices do I need to make money? And is that price in line with the market? It's your supply demand curve, right? Very classic. Yeah. But actually it's a nonlinear supply demand curve, because everything changes all the time with foreign exchange, fuel, costs, inflation, so many different things. We talk about it every day. But long story short is we do we see slightly different than your experience. It works very well.
I'm not
No,
just,
no, it's okay. Don't worry. It's
I'm not
okay. It's
criticizing. It's just
I think that what I was going to tell you was there's a limit to how much you can use that airplane. I always argue the plane can do. Duarte and I always debate this. We can fly the airplane probably 9.5 hours, but there's a sticking point at which after 6, 7, people become jittery. They don't want to be in a small plane anymore. But you can find a way to make it happen. So, for example, if you look at what we did now to Manaus, we're going to Belém, we're taking a stop, and then we go to Manaus. So much more convenient than getting off an airplane, getting your bag, getting back on, waiting 2 hours. You just continue to your destination. We couldn't do it with a big plane. Be too expensive. Be prohibitive from a sustainability point of view as well. So we look at those, but also with the small planes, you offer frequency, right? And you offer more itineraries.
Yep.
We use Google Analytics a lot to understand what people are doing. It's very important to us. Point of sale, you have different point of sales, right? You have Brazil, we can talk about any market. You have, we look at the brand power. So it's really interesting. The US like different things than the Europeans, right? Same with the food, same with the quality, and we actually found that we can use that to our advantage because sometimes some people, let's say, want to come to Lisbon and others want to go to Paris. We created what's called the stopover program, right? And you know that you can stop 10 days. So couples, for example, they tend to have fights, right? They want to do one or the other. They can do both now, right? They stop in Lisbon, stay a few days, and they move on. And you create all of these optimized itineraries that really work well. Same for the corporates, right? We look at what they want when they're flying to Sao Paulo or when they're flying to Brussels or when they're flying. We look at what times of day we want. So Duarte, remember we moved a Madrid flight in the morning, 45 minutes. It was at 7 and we moved it to 7:55. For you, it was like not a big deal. It was a huge deal because it was a bit too early for people at 7 because they have to get up at 5. 7:55 was more manageable and they still got to a 10 a.m. meeting. And it made a huge difference to us. And it still worked on the connectivity. So you're continuously iterating. But I'm not going to tell you there's an answer. It's nonlinear. There's a different answer every week you look.
Questions?
Thank you.
It's
Can you
about
please
the
identify
Sure.
yourself?
Jose Viegas, former professor at Técnico.
Hello.
It's about the intermodal connectivity and the smoothness, the convenience in the purchase.
Right.
The number of railway connections from Frankfurt Airport is already there for more than 10 years.
Yes.
Do you already have an empirical perception of increased sales because of the inclusion in the purchasing process instead of having 2 different purchasing points?
Yes. So if you're a guy sitting in Houston who knows nothing about Frankfurt, unlike me who live there and I know pretty much every way to get to a train in 36 minutes from the gate, you're probably going to think, I want someone to do everything for me. In the same way that I said to you, let's go together to Austin, and then let's take a bus together. You're going to do your research. And imagine if we just offer that seamlessly to someone. You save them a lot of trouble. It's the same for me. I just came back from my little trip to Quito in Colombia. Although I'm knowledgeable and I'm well-traveled, I still didn't know a lot. And I liked that through friends or through a website, I was able to see all these connectivities without actually doing much of the work. There are some people that like to be independent, and there are others that don't, and you need to have both. And this is the problem. Generally, the population is becoming much more demanding, many more things, and want to pay much less. So you have to work with the concept that you need to be dynamically agile all the time, every day of your life. It's remarkable.
I understand the point. My question is it already empirically observable?
Yes. Otherwise,
That
we
you
wouldn't
have
be
more
doing it.
sales because of that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. And then I was explaining why.
Yeah, I understand.
Absolutely.
I understand the reasons.
We wouldn't do it because when people look, they like to not think as much as they do, unless they're one of those stubborn people that likes to really understand where they're going and what they're doing. Most people just go on a website, they click, and they want to be able to say, I need to get to Cologne. Okay. I don't want to think about that I need to go to Düsseldorf. Maybe I want to go to Frankfurt and I just want to take a train after. I don't want to know what train I'm taking. There's 7 different trains out of Frankfurt. Do I want the slow train? Do I want the fast train? The trains that go through 3 stops, the one that goes direct? We create those kind of competitive environments that allow people to know that what they're buying is good.
And it comes integrated in the ticket, as you said.
And you're protected. So if you miss your train, you get onto the next train. You don't need to worry about anything. People are willing to pay for that. They want the convenience of knowing I don't need to do anything.
I remember some 10 years ago, I wanted to go to, I think, Cologne or Düsseldorf.
Right.
And I bought a ticket with Lufthansa.
Right.
And the train ride with Deutsche Bahn was actually a Lufthansa flight number.
Yes, exactly. It's the same with us. We have them all.
Yeah. Any other question? I have one question if nobody has. Okay, so you talked, and the question is for both of you, so Roger and Henri. So Roger started by talking to us about connectivity and aggregation effects. You talked about blockchain. I think it makes a lot of sense, the two together, connectivity, blockchain. But the question is in terms of planning and in terms of strategy, there are acceptable slakes, but what is the tolerance limit for those slakes when you are setting up your blockchain or your connectivity in terms of regional development, in terms of operations? And it goes for both.
Roger, do you want to start?
Roger, do you want to start?
Yes, I can do. I think one of the interesting things about that is the use of the term connectivity rather than accessibility. And that is important because when we sort of try and measure accessibility, we try and reduce it to a sort of simple metric. But connectivity is important because it includes this important issue of the frequency as well. So what you want to know is that you're going to be able to get from A to B, and that you've got the opportunity to think about, you know, when does my meeting finish? Do I have an option of different flights? Does the ticket enable me to do that? Does the ticket enable me to change if my meeting runs over or not? And so I think that connectivity point is particularly important there, where you've got multiple flights, because that gives you the feeling that you are you've got greater freedom. The problem, I think, is when you go to the smaller, more regional airports, you're not going to have that degree of flexibility. And so that may push you towards thinking about, well, I will use one of the major hub airports because I know I've got more flexibility within that. And just going back to the previous question from Jose, I mean, one of the interesting things there is the extent to which it has been very, very difficult to book train tickets that can take you across Europe. I mean, there's a lot of encouragement to say taking the train is much more environmentally friendly than taking the plane. It's easier to take the plane because you can book a ticket, and you can book a ticket that involves multiple stops, including possibly taking the train for part of that. But try and book a train ticket across Europe sometimes has become much more difficult. It's becoming easier, but it has been very, very difficult. And that flexibility that people want in being able to see how things will pan out and have the options of what happens when there is a delay somewhere is something that means that in some senses you prefer to put yourself in the hands of an airline which you hope will look after you, particularly if it's a full service airline, that it will look after you if there is a problem en route. Whereas if you're stuck on a train, very often you feel you're not being looked after in the same way. And so I think that is also something that people are looking towards, being able to be looked after, as it were, particularly those who are less frequent travelers.
Henri?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the problem you have is we were first to the game in creating trains in Europe, and then we were late to the game in optimizing them and keeping them alive. And whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Italy, whether it's in Spain, they finally started getting their act together, and it's working much better. I mean, this is why Charles de Gaulle is amazing, because you can have a train pretty much anywhere to go skiing. And Roger, to the point now, they're trying to create a train between Paris and Berlin, right? And, you know, some of these longer journeys and trying to build these extensions of these connectivities. You know, I'll never forget when I was studying at Superior in Toulouse, and I used to go to Barcelona, and you had to wait 40 minutes at the border because they had to change the size of the rail because the trains weren't even aligned in terms of, you know, the magnitude of the tracks. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm not saying the right word. But it's really frustrating because, yeah, you're right. You could do so much more. But as I talked about, it's the systems. And it's not the capability of the systems. It's the, without naming names, we're trying to work with 2 or 3 different companies. It's been impossible to reach the train company in Morocco to try and do a deal with them. It's so easy. Once you get to Casablanca, you go downstairs, you have a TGV. They're the old TGVs from Paris. Cost 30 euros, and you can get there seamlessly. Of course, you buy a ticket, you can do it, but you have to download a new app. It's just more trouble, right? You need a minimum viable product.
Yeah. What is that minimum? You
If
just
you-
said 40 minutes is unacceptable. But then when you define and design your network, at what moment of that slake you start to say, well, this is the limit, we are going to start losing for any other competition that we may have?
Well, your minimum viable product starts with your demand, always. So you saw on the chart that I showed in LA, there was this 160 passengers a day each way that were trying to get to Lisbon. It wasn't easy because if it's a one-stop, it's always more work. You can assume there's going to be huge amounts of expansion, you know, stimulation due to the fact that if you put a non-stop, it's more easy for people to get there. Okay, so you take that, tick, tick, tick. Then you think about, well, who's my competitors? Well, if you think about where LA is versus Lisbon, it's right at the front. Are many people going to go via Paris and via whatnot? And we look at all these things. And I think as long as you can reach the point where 30, 40, 50% of your plane is coming to Lisbon, then you have a minimum viable product. And it needs to be at least, in my experience, 3 times a week. People want to feel like they're not stuck somewhere. Or you can do less as long as you have partners. So if you can connect through another partner, then you're okay. And that's very important as well. And there isn't, I think everybody thinks there's a winning formula. There isn't. Every day it changes. If you could ask me that question every year, I'd give you a different answer. The success of aviation is dynamic flexibility and agility. That's why Ryanair is so amazing. They literally see something not working, they change right away. They don't wait. They don't think it's going to work. And the problem with the world is the moment a war breaks out, the moment something changes, the moment the Kwanzaa gets weak, the moment the dollar gets really strong, you start seeing a shift in demand. You have this expensive return on capital employed, whether it's an airport, Roger, or whether it's airplanes. You can't just switch it off and ground it and say, I'm not going to pay my $1 million a month in one airplane. It's okay. I'm going to call the lessor and tell them, sorry, I'm on a holiday. I don't feel like flying right now. The demand's really bad. They're going to look at you and say, it's a joke. You can't do that. You have 10-year contracts. You have to, so this is why I talked about in the beginning, where you have to create a niche network that depends on itself, that feeds on itself, so that you're not dependent on one thing, but on 100 things, so that when things shift, if Brazil doesn't do so well, we shift to the US. If US doesn't well, we shift to Africa. If it doesn't, we do ACMIs. You know, there's many different things we can do to ensure that we're not fully dependent. And if you remember in the first slide I put, I said there has to be an equilibrium and balance between all of the intercontinentals. Never put your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely flexibility and agility is really a new paradigm for planning in general in transport, not only in air transport, but also in land transport. So thank you very much to both of you and for this interesting discussion and presentation. Nuno, can you please come to the stage and present our next speaker?
Well, Well, our next speaker is Ruben Lois Gonzalez. He's professor of geography at Santiago de Compostela University in the Department of Geography and Town and Country Planning. He's a specialist in urban and cultural geography, and also he was director of general director of tourism of the autonomous Galician government, and dean of the Faculty of Geography, and also director of Euro Regional Study Center in Spain. Now it's also guest lecturer in several universities in France, Norway, Canada, and of course Brazil. And he is very welcome. And please, Ruben, thank you for your participation, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah. My presentation is in relation with the relations between airport system, urban networks, and territorial organization in Spain. For a first idea in relation with this. The first is the location of Spain is the same than Portugal. It's a peripheral location in Europe, a peripheral geographical location in relation with the continental systems of transport connections. This is the first data. Normally, with the touristical weight of Spain, normally the elements of the peripheral location are more and more moderate in relation with the airport system. In relation with Spain, we have two conditioning of the airport system. The first, the business, the position of Spain, normally the Iberian Peninsula between European Union and the other continents. The previous conference, the previous presentation insists in a big and strong question, the connection between Iberian Peninsula and Latin American airports and Latin American economy. This is a very relevant element. The second, the mass tourism in Spain, close to 19 million of foreign tourists last year in Spain. This for the airport system is a very strong input, are the other elements. The third question, the air system in Spain was built in the Franco period with a real military conception on the air transport or the air communication. This is the beginning with a strong democratical transition, and in the present in a context of neoliberalism. But between the past, the present, and the perspective from the future, this is the debate about the air system. Next, please. Yeah, this is the interpretation of urban system in Spain. Two big cities, Madrid and Barcelona, the development and urban axis in the Mediterranean area, in the north, in the Andalusia, in Galicia, with a continuation with the north region of Portugal. This normally is the functional geographical regard of Spain. Next. And this is the airport map in Spain. Normally is a regular map with strong connections between the coastal areas and the big center inside this the country if in Madrid. And normally the Spain geographical interpretation is with a dialectic knowledge, dialectic understand. The first is a strong image as Madrid is the capital of the national state, is a very strong classical idea of centralization with a radial model of concentration of the transport networks in Madrid, but really is a very strong urban and economical development in the coastal areas, in Catalonia, in the Basque Country, in the Mediterranean coastal area. And to explain the airport system, this dialectic between Madrid and the peripheral and coastal regions are very important. Next. This is the other strong element, is a map from the official Spanish National Atlas, is the number and the origin of tourists in Spain. We have a strong economy of tourism, but the tourists are very concentrated in the Mediterranean regions between Catalonia and Andalusia, the east part of the country, and the two island regions, Balearic Island, Mallorca and Ibiza, maybe, and Canary Island. This is important for the airport system. The other secondary regions in tourism, Madrid, maybe is important. The north, Bilbao especially, and the Galicia region between three different airports. Next, please. The idea in Spain is a transition, a political transition between a centralized to a decentralized country. But this is a permanent debate in the daily politics in Spain. What is the build, which is the correct understand of Spain? For the Spaniards are a big problem between some part of the country develop interpretation with a very an idea of the centralized country, unitarian country, but another part of the country develop an interpretation of a very decentralized. Yesterday was a big football match between Madrid and Barcelona. This is a metaphoric small revolution in the sport between two different meaning of the Spanish state between the centralized Madrid and the more peripheral, the other Spain from Catalonia and from Barcelona. This is in the different sentences. This is the opposition, the traditional opposition, with a very strong importance in the air transport map. Madrid is Spain. This is a sentences from the conservative president of the Madrid, the Madrid Autonomous Community, or Spain is plurinational. This is normally sentences from the Catalonian and the Basque Country, and this is different. One big airport or a few numbers of complementary airports in the system. This debate is a permanent debate in Spain in relation with the air transport. First, Madrid. Madrid is a very strong hub, airport hub, because more and more Madrid centralized the big companies in Spain, the major multinational companies in the financial, energy, communications. A part of these big companies was the public companies. Endesa or Telefónica was the public companies with the process of privatization from the 80s and especially from the 90s in Spain. And these multinationals likes a very good connections with Latin America. Spain is one, as Portugal, the country, the strategic country in relation with the connections between European Union and Latin America. Perhaps Portugal more with Brazil or Venezuela, but Spain has a very strong connections with the Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America, and even with Venezuela and Brazil. This is the position or the relation between Barajas Airport in Madrid, a strong airport, with Iberia, regular company from Spain in the transnational group IAG with the British Airways, and with a lot of Latin American connections. A complementary position is from a private company, Air Europa, located in Mallorca, but especially the connections between Air Europa and more touristical or secondary hubs in Latin America operate from Madrid Airport especially. Madrid is a very centralized point with the Latin American airports, with the Latin American air transport network. This is even a traditional idea to build in Madrid a real global city in the Spanish-speaking world. But Barcelona resists with the other economical sectors, the creativity, the communication companies, knowledge, and Barcelona is a very strong touristical city, and resist with a number of passengers and a number of flights very close to Madrid. But the map of Barcelona is perhaps different than Madrid. A lot of connections with Europe, a lot of shorter connections in relation with Madrid, and with a good connection with Latin America and the other continents. But maybe Barcelona is more European network in Spain, and with the other companies, different companies in relation with Iberia. Iberia is a very secondary actor in the airport of Barcelona. Next, please. These are the domestic connections in Spain in 70. Next. Yeah, is no, before, sorry. Is the present, is more and more complex connections and more polycentric evolution inside the Spain, the connections, because Madrid are very specialized in Latin America connections, but inside connections, more and more Barcelona has a central position with the other second, third, or regional metropolitan cities in Spain. It's very important in this connection the paper, the development with a company is the same transnational group IAG with British Airways and Iberia, but it's a low-cost option is Vueling. And Vueling, the capital of Vueling is Barcelona. Is the development of this complementarity with Madrid and with the other with the other connections. Next, please. And this is the traditional leaders in the different airports in Spain: Iberia, Madrid, Vueling, Barcelona, and the rest. The low cost, because the other big airports in Spain are touristical airports, maybe. But more and more the situation changed. The hegemony of Ryanair is moderate in the last period, and Vueling improved. And the competition between Ryanair and Vueling is more and more important in the airports in Spain now. And the the arrival of the other companies and the development of the other companies, EasyJet or Air Europa or Volotea or Transavia, the different operators in the Spanish airport. Next, please. This is only an image of the touristification over tourism in Barcelona. Barcelona is the top 10 in the touristical cities in the world. And the key of the success of Barcelona is the good aerial connections. But the good aerial connections, especially with the other cities in Europe, not especially the capital cities, is a densified network of cities with connection of Barcelona. The other touristical cities in Spain have the same model. Is close to the Mallorca model or the Malaga model. A lot of connections with the German city, with the British city, with the Nordic country city are very important to explain the touristical massification, the touristical success, and the very good results in the aerial traffic. Next, please. The elements of the airport system in Spain are the same. The global Madrid, in the future, build a global city, and it's very important the connections between Santiago de Chile and Buenos Aires to Miami or Chicago. The connections with Miami are very strong to the different sectors in the Spanish-speaking regions of the world. Spain has a strong presence in Latin America, especially in the financial sector. Santander Bank or BBV Bank in the top 25 banks of the world. Santander in the top 10 has a lot of business in Latin America. And the connections between Sao Paulo and Madrid, Bogota and Madrid with the BBV, Mexico City and Madrid are very important in relation with the financial sector, but also the complementary activities in relation with the financial sectors. The other elements, communications, Telefónica, the presence of the phone company from Spain in Latin America is very strong. It's a big operator in the majority of the countries. This is a key question in relation with the position. The other thing is the touristical boom and the very strong input of the touristical boom in the airport system in Spain. Next, please. These are the connections between Madrid, the foreign connections from Madrid in 2023 is a very clear, concentrated map in relation with the rest of Europe, but with a strong intensity with Latin America. And now the flights between Latin America and Madrid are completely full. This is the reason of the very good results of IAG the last years, because the upper class, the elites from Latin America also visit Madrid. The business connection are very important, but the tourism and the mobility to the commercial motivation, the touristical motivations between the capitals or the upper class from Latin America in relation with Madrid, in relation with Spain, are very important. It's very difficult to buy an economic seat in a flight between Latin America and Spain in the different months of the year. I speak in first person because in a part of my travels to Latin America, I changed to Portugal, to TAP, or to the other companies, the Brazilian companies or the other Latin American companies, because the price of Iberia, of the Spanish companies, are very high, because the demand is very strong now, and the success of connections Latin America, Spain, are very strong. Next. This is the connections. The other was the passengers. And next, this is the different pictures in relation with the investments of Spanish economy in South American countries, and the presence in South American sectors. This is curious because Spain developed a strategy, a friendly strategy with Latin America. Normally, the relations between the metropolis and the former colonies are more conflictual. The more clear example now is the relations between the African former colonies, French former colonies in Africa, and the France in the present, with the big crisis of France-Afrique model. But Spain lost the colonies in America in 19th century, and the question of colonization is a very long historical element. 125, 130 years, or 200 years long. The community of interest, the languages, the culture are very close. And Spain, from the 1992, developed a reconnection with Latin America, a friendly, a broader connection with the different countries in Latin America, but in the same in the same process, the big multinational companies from Spain develop a biggest penetration in the economies of Latin America. Was a political strategical position from the Madrid government, especially in the period of Felipe González, in the socialist period, in the 5th century of discovery of America campaign. And in parallel, the big companies penetration from Mexico to Chile economies with a real complete success. And this is very important to justify the air connections now with Latin America. Next, please. This is the touristical map in Spain. Is very clear the other reason of the air transport. Next, please. And these are the different airports and the change in the last year of data of passengers. The operativity of the transports in Spain improve permanently. This is a fast growth in relation with the improve the mobility, the improve of economy. Spain growth this year 3% of GDP, and the mobility improve, and the internal mobility improve a lot. And even with strong development or the fast train, the air transport resists very good. Perhaps the rail system are more effectiveness between Madrid and inside the capitals. But this area is a very complementary, very secondary area in the map of airports, the national map of airports. But with the peripheral airports, even with a fast train connections, also the result is the full flights between Madrid and the peripheral areas, full flights between peripheral and peripheral cities in Spain, and the trains, the fast trains, are full also. And the low cost in the majority of the case is more quickly than the fast train price. And this is another new in Spain. The fast train is a very good system of connection, but in the defenses elements is not an interesting option for a part of the public. Next, please. This is the synthesis in relation with our speaks in relation with Spain. Now the competition between, next please, is better. Next is more graphic. The competition between Madrid and Barcelona is very clear. The level of passengers is very close. Now Madrid is more important in relation with the connections with America, but the balance between Madrid and Barcelona is each perfect. And in some months, Barcelona is the first terminal in Spain. The question is more foreign connections from Barcelona, because is normally the connection with the other European countries. But in Spain, the touristical airports are also very important. Mallorca is not long of passengers in relation with Barcelona and Madrid. Alicante, Malaga, and the Canary Island airports are strong in this map. And more growth, the other airports, the other regional city airports in Spain. And this is interesting. Especially interesting is the Bilbao case. Bilbao is a economical center of the Basque Country, and the Basque government improve the connections between Bilbao and the European destinations, and support this new hub position, new centralized position from Bilbao to develop a very innovative economy, very innovative regional economy in Basque Country. And the airport of Bilbao is interesting to a long development of passengers in the last period. The other case are the Galician airports or the Sevilla airport, with a centralized connections between urban systems, regional urban systems, and more touristical specialization. Next, please. This is the operation, the connections of planes. Next. And this is the trade mobility, is the complementary map. Next. These are the presentation of the data from the Spanish Authority of the Aerian Navigation, a long list of airports, and it's very easy to develop the consultation of this data. Next. Really, in Spain, in the different periods, have a complete modernization of the terminals. The idea of the modernizing the airports is a common point between the different governments in Spain. Normally, the European Spain idea of the Social Democrats from the Socialist Party and the hub with Latin America is important, but with the conservative government improved this idea. And now the terminals in Madrid, Barcelona, but maybe in Palma, Malaga, Bilbao, Santiago de Compostela are very clear. And the location of the airports more and more are intelligent locations out of the cities, and with the possibilities of growth of terminals. Perhaps the only problem in this is the Barcelona case, because in the present the Barcelona airport have a plan to grow the terminal, the operational terminal, but in Catalonia is the political debate is very hungry normally, and in relation with the ecological elements, the growth of the airport in Barcelona is a critical debate between the Spanish government with the conservative national parties in Catalonia, Junts especially, support this growth of airport, and with the Spanish conservative, and against are the other left, the left nationalist in Catalonia, Esquerra Republicana, and the left Spanish political party, Sumar, and the Comuns and the other parties, and is more critical. And normally the new plans have a possibility of a development, but with a slow velocity in the case of Barcelona, with the critical debate about the ecological restrictions of the airports. Next. These are only the image of the different types of AAG, multinational aerian company in Spain, with Iberia and Vueling. Madrid and Barcelona is a very intelligent strategy for business, and is curious to analyze the double characteristics between Madrid and Barcelona, decentralized or centralized state in Spain. Next, please. In Spain are also the important debate in relation with the small and medium-sized airports and cities. Normally, all the cities likes airport, a terminal. Is important to the representation of the external promotion and the external image of the cities in Spain. Another element is Spain has a strong regionalization, and each regional capital like a good airport or a good aerian connections. And the third element, all Spanish city likes attract tourists, and the aerian traffic is very important to growth in the touristical thing. It's interesting to analyze the Bilbao case. The other second, third cities are perhaps more modest. Zaragoza is impossible development of the airport, because it's very close in relation with Madrid and Barcelona, and the system of fast train and the highway is the best connection of this city. And Sevilla improved, but limited with a very good connections by train. And the other regional cities improve the connectivity, Santiago, Granada, and even the very small cities, Santander, because it's the Cantabria region, Coruña, or the small cities in Andalusia, as Jerez, Cádiz, the possibilities of the airports and the connectivity to tourism and the connectivity with the big cities in Spain. Next, please. And these are the image of the terminals and the connections from Bilbao. It's the interesting example. Next, please. These are the the international connection from Bilbao. Next. And the international connection from Santiago de Compostela Airport. Next. And the fast train map to understand the limitation of growth of some airports or some aerial connections in Spain. The fast train connections are very centralized in Madrid. This perhaps is a reason of the success of Vueling proposal, because Barcelona are not especially good connected with the other cities in Spain with the fast train. Depend a lot of Madrid. I prefer develop a big terminal with Vueling connections and improve these connections. Next. The image of bad resolutions, because in some case Spain develop airports, but airports without passengers. This is the classical example of the airport of Castilla-La Mancha inside Spain. The regional government likes airport, but the airport don't have the conditions to operate, because Castilla-La Mancha is very close to Madrid and open the airport, but the airport now is closed. It's an example of failure of the construction of the airports in each big city in Spain. Next. It's interesting to understand the position. Perhaps it's a debate for this journey or the future journey. Develop the thinking in relation with the Iberian space in relation with the air transport. Because Spain is a reality, Portugal is another reality, but the connections between Spain and Portugal are more and more important. And the key, the first element is Iberian Peninsula is the bridges between European Union, Latin America, and Africa with Portugal. This is a key to understand the strategic position of Lisbon, Madrid, Barcelona, and even Porto. And the second element with this debate in the last minutes of my presentation, the Iberian air transport is more important in the context of the Mediterranean European world. Why? Because the foreign connections with Latin America and Africa, and also is more important the touristical connections by plane from to Spain or to Portugal than Italy or the south of France. And the terminals, the airports in Spain and Portugal together are strong and explain the reality with the three big airports in the present: Madrid, Lisbon, and Barcelona, with in my opinion, a very strong competition between the three terminals. It's interesting to analyze this competition in relation with the hegemony in the concept of the global city, or the global city in relation with the Spanish, Portuguese speaking areas, or in relation with the touristical big mobility in relation with the climatic tourism. And another important element for us, I am Galician, and the terminal of Porto is at 2 hours in relation with my house, is the Porto airport. The Porto is a very good terminal, very functional, improve more and more. 1 million or 1.5 million of Galicians use the Porto Airport to the international connections. And the conditions of the terminal of Porto are very good in relation with the big problems inside the city of Lisbon, of the airport in Lisbon. This is a debate for the Portuguese friends in relation with this, and for me is interesting to improve more and more Porto as the fourth possibility of connection or not. Next are the different maps in relation with the connections. Next, the connections with Africa and Latin America from Lisbon. Next, these are the four regional airports between Porto to Coruña in less of 3 hours of distance by highway, and with the faster and complementary element in the future, I hope, between Vigo and Porto. Perhaps the distance are very, very close. This is a debate, a strategic debate for the future connections or the construction of a very functional network of transport with the different types of transport, and the construction for a very good urban and economical integrated region. Next, please. And the conclusion. I developed the connections between air transport and geopolitics. In Spain, the geopolitics is very important, and in Iberian Peninsula is important. I like it a lot, the first and the second presentation, but I like it also introduce the elements of politics, the governance, and the territorial debates in relation with the Spanish and the Iberian areas. The debate in relation with airports and the spatial planning or strategical planning, and the relations between air transport with the paradigm of neoliberalism. The competition is very important, but the decision of a state support or not support connections, develop strong investments in the terminals or not, are important. And the neoliberalism is this element with the strong competitions, but with a paternity of investments or intervention of the different countries. And I finish. Next, and thank you. No, next, yeah, and I finish my presentation.
So let's start the second stage of our conference, and I'm pleased to announce Jorge Abrantes is Doctor in Tourism by the IGOT. He have more than 30 years of experience in tourism and aviation market. Is professor since '92 in tourism, and his research are related with tourism and transportation, innovation, and new models of lodgement. He is also several consultant so for several enterprises and national service. So I'm pleased to welcome Jorge, please. It's a pleasure to have you.
Boa tarde, good afternoon. I don't know if there is, I think there is some English people yet, so I'll try to do it in English. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation to be here and to reflect a little bit more about air transportation and city tourism. Best way to start, as we are in Lisbon, is with this. Yeah, it's the obrigado. The best way to start, I think, as we are in Lisbon, is for this Lisbon Declaration on City, with this strong message, building cities for citizens and visitors. And as we have there, according to the United Nations, 54% of people lives in cities. The number is growing, so more pressure in territories. And we have here some, these are from that declaration, some important statements that are important that I'll develop later on regarding this growth of tourism by affordable transport costs, increased mobility, travel facilitation, and also some of important challenges, namely regarding with pressure on infrastructures, on mobility, and also some of use in intense mode of natural resources. Ah, não funciona. Fugiu. Ah, não. Let's go a little bit further on these affordable transport costs. And I think that your first thought was low-cost carriers. But if you look at this chart here, we have a long period, the initial long period, where jet aircraft, and the slope is even more aggressive than in the last years, on jet aircraft was critical for this cost reduction, not only the introduction of jet aircraft, but bigger aircrafts. And bigger aircrafts means more costs, so cost per available seat kilometer reduced, more efficient engines, and you have that also with less fuel burn through the years. And after, it's true, we have here two important moments to this US deregulation. So the Deregulation Act in 1978, signed by President Jimmy Carter, with the liberalization of the air transport in the United States, and later on in April 97, in Europe. In these two moments is when low costs start to develop this new way of business model in terms of aviation and with impacts in tourism. During the previous period, we had also an important moment regarding the creation of charter airlines. It's true that they have they were not directly related with city tourism because they were more focused on beach and sun tourism from North Europe to Mediterranean, from North of America to Caribbean and Florida and California. And that with the packaging, the charter airlines, charter flights, tour operators have a massive impact on this cost of the tourism, this tourism package. But these two moments, this deregulation and this liberalization processes were critical for the introduction of the low-cost carriers. It's true that there are other factors today. If we look to the new models of aircrafts that Charles had the opportunity to present, namely the long range of the ultra long range or extra long range aircrafts, permitting to go to longer distances with lower costs, operational costs, are also having a great contribution for that reduction of costs. And reduction of costs in terms of aviation means more competitiveness of the market, more opportunities to develop the tourism as the destinations have opportunity to go with these aircrafts to go longer and to develop new opportunities in these different markets. This increased mobility and travel facilitation, although what we have here is more based on full service carriers, that notion of hubs that we heard previously. And we have here a lot of these hubs in Europe, where is a critical and a good concentration of them, but also in this area of the Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha in the Middle East. But we can't forget also the importance of low-cost carriers in this situation, because especially in Europe, also in America, but especially in Europe, they have the capacity to, through new operational bases, to densify the market, to start new flights from secondary and tertiary airports, and with this creating new opportunities even for development of tourism. Travel facilitation, in part due to these new liberalization processes, but also from the technology. Internet, new ways of commercialization, Airbnb, new ways of new products in terms of short rentals, and also short breaks in terms of the tourism, and this more related with city tourism. Travel facilitation, also the seamless travel experience. IATA just had a trial in the end of October with a flight between Hong Kong and Japan, Narita Airport, with passenger, all seamless, e-passport, e-travel, e-ticket, e-visa, with all of these based on wallets, permitting passengers to fly from one airport to another one without no more than the cell phone. So the trial was done, and this will be the future in the next years. Some to-do list regarding this declaration of Lisbon, the integration of the tourism value chain with different players from the airports, from the airlines, but also the local communities. And this last sentence here, with a more efficient use of resources. We had an example of Barcelona with all these crowded streets, with this more efficient use of research and reduction of emissions. And emissions, we have also the airline emissions regarding the use of the new sustainable aviation fuels, waste, and I would include also noise, because we know that in some cases, especially in cities, and we have some examples of it in Bairro Alto, noise is also an important problem between this balance that must exist between tourists and residents. This WTTC, World Travel and Tourism, economic impact, city travel is back, as said. And city travel is back because recovered faster than other segments after the pandemic. City travel is back because it represents almost half of all tourists in terms of the different segments worldwide. And if we take into consideration, and this is only the last part of the declaration of the definition of urban tourism in WTO, the World Tourism Organization, we can see that this heterogeneous range of cultural motivations in cities, you have almost all of them, from culture and heritage, from meetings industry, from business, from wedding, from gambling, from shopping, from fashion, you name it. You have all these type of motivations in the city regarding the tourism. And this is why they are here in hub. Well, all these impacts, these economic impacts, these human impacts, social impacts, and these environmental impacts too are critical for what a city is. Some examples regarding the most important cities in terms of bad nights in Europe, and no surprises. Perhaps Istanbul is a surprise for some of us in this third position. But again, we can't forget here the position of Turkish Airlines as the most with the most extensive network in the world, 320 airports served in 171 countries, Guinness of the records, and also with a very important transfer traffic in Istanbul airport. And this transfer traffic, like we have in other airports and also in TAP with stopover program, represents opportunities in order that people can stay in the cities, in this case, in the airports area, and visit the cities. And Turkish is doing, Turkish and Turkey is doing it very, very well, as Dubai, for instance. But here I concentrate only in European cities. What is critical in terms of attractiveness? I bring you only these main aspects. There are many more, depends on different system tourisms that you can study. But here you have attractions, natural, artificial, events, unique selling points that attract people to a city. Big Ben in London that we saw in the first place, Eiffel Tower or Notre Dame in Paris. These are the main situations that brings people to the cities, despite other motivations. Accessibility in terms of transport, all types of transport, not only airports, but transfer between airport and the city center. Activities, what to do when we are visiting the city. Museums, theaters, festivals, all these type of attractions, of activities. And the last one, not least, these facilities. And we are talking about, I'm talking about hardware, accommodation, different types of accommodation, but also support services, hospitals, banks, communications that are critical in order to have this attractiveness. But, and we have always a but, this sentence here is very, and it's from an expert group recently in Bilbao, a city that is not good for its citizens would not be attractive to tourists. And this is a change of paradigm of what we have today. Less hardware, but also include the residents. Why? To avoid these conflicts that are escalating worldwide. In one hand, situations of mass tourism, over tourism. In other hand, these movements of residents against tourists. So this is a good way, let's say, to balance these two critical situations. Some challenges, they are, and we need a better planning regarding these saturation situations, this degradation of space, in order to give more quality of life to tourists and to residents, for sure. And also, what are the recommendations in urban tourism or in the United Nations tourism? And we can see here a lot of them that are related with the territory, no doubt about it. Big data and technology. And again, we have here transport and mobility. In these cases, we are talking about some of these urban mobility, new types of mobility in cities. These technology, accessibility, and sustainability in these areas. But again, this technology that is not only in the city, but also in the air transportation regarding the new use of engines, new use of materials in order the aircrafts are lighter and so consuming less fossil fuels, accessibility, in this case, more in inclusive tourism rather in the transports. And the last one that is more or less important regarding this balance, necessary balance, between this engagement of visitors and residents in point 8. But again, some of these points are related also with the concern and this challenge regarding urban tourism. This is almost in the year I'm jumping in an area where some of you are the experts, especially in redeMOV. You are studying this phenomenon. I'm putting it on a level on more air mobility. What we have here, some examples of what the big manufacturers are doing, not only Airbus, and these are only electrical ones trying to, the city Airbus that is here in middle, that is a project that Airbus is trying to develop, but others arrived first. Whisk, company bought by Boeing, and almost with in the last phase of certification in autonomous vehicles, air taxi, and crewed vehicles, and in terms of what expected in the air transportation in aviation. We have here 2 examples. The biggest international airlines, namely the Americans' biggest international airlines, United with this Archer Aviation and with Southwest, the biggest low-cost worldwide, that is working with this Archer model, but also with Eve Air Mobility of Embraer, that is the one that has more expression actually in terms of orders. This one, American, it's an English with the Vertical Aerospace. It's an English UK project, also with all of them are already certified by FAA or UK Civil Aviation Authority, are in the last phase of certification, and is not here, but Delta Airlines that is working with in another project with Joby, that is also a good project, although with less orders than these 2 and Eve Air Mobility. There are other projects. The things are changing very quick in these eVTOLs, in these Lilium went out of the market, but seems that is an investor, Volocopter bankruptcy. So there are a lot of things changing in this market. Chinese have already a model certificate, full certificate, and already made some commercial flights using this type of eVTOLs. But as I said to you, it's something that is going very, very fast and is expected. The first ones are expected to be in the market working in 2000 next year. Archer will do the experiment, let's say like that, in Abu Dhabi, sign a protocol with them, and after with United. Where are these airlines using these new aircrafts? They're not aircrafts. They are using them mainly in cities, between airports or between airports. Because of United States, Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark, or between city center. This is what is expected. In this previous model, we are talking about autonomous vehicle. So no crew in the front of this vehicle. So it means that everything is expected to work smoothly, no problems with technology when working. But it's something that is in the last phase of certification. What is important to see that this is not only something that interests to airlines. As you can see here in this document regarding the, let's say, strategic plan of airports by the International Airport Association. And you can see here that this intermodal connectivity with other models, urban models, are a reality and is expected. You can see here for 2040 an integration of this urban air mobility and vertical takeoff with these eVTOLs, full integrated multimodal hubs, also for, in this case, for passengers. And it's true, it needs investment. It's a good opportunity, I think, for the future Lisbon airport, where can have these situations in place. We saw some insights regarding trains. This is the train, the fastest train in China, the Hyperloop. The first project of Hyperloop failed. They closed the shutdown last year, but the Chinese took the idea. They have already done some experiments. They expect to have future trains with 1,000 kilometers per hour. So reducing for sure the distances and putting more pressure in these small distances in the air transportation. What we have here is their vision for 2050, 30,000 kilometers, almost 500 million passengers per year, and already so an eye in Europe. So let's hope that this is not a failed project like the others in Hyperloop in United States. But normally Chinese here are more committed with this type of things. To finish, an old example. And I say an old example because there are dozens of research done about the impact of low costs in Porto, about the entrance in Ryanair in Porto. But I'll bring this example because next week Ryanair will celebrate the 20th year of starting operations to Porto. And that was the motto to bring this, as said, old example. They started with the flight from Stansted to Porto. In 2005, in November, when started the winter, the IATA winter period, they introduced the Frankfurt-Hahn, so 2 routes in 2005, and in this calendar, in 2011, they already had an operation for 32 airports with more than 2.2 million passengers. In 2010, they began, and they are still, since 2010, the major airline in Porto Airport. They beat TAP until that year was TP, so they had almost 1.6 million in 2010, and we can see since the beginning, so they were the most important full low-cost carrier for this market. In terms of tourism, only for comparison, and you can see almost that the trend in the total number of bed nights accomplished here, or what is the trend in the foreign bed nights in the domestic market, almost the same. So since the introduction of low costs in Porto, and the first low cost was Air Berlin at that time, number double, which is significant. Last figures we have here regarding the last quarter of 2023, low cost share 62% in Porto. In this top 10 airlines, you can see that TAP is now in 3rd position, and all the other ones, the full service carriers, are here in a very timid position. Lufthansa 4%, Iberia 3%. Porto municipality, and they are all only looking to the municipality of Porto, not the big Porto area. Foreign bed nights again, 8 times more. Portuguese bed night during this period, 2 times more, and Porto record after record, year after year. 2024 missing last December, but will be again a record year. So these low costs, no doubt, that are bringing a good apport for the Porto region. As I tried to discover, this was in a journal some years ago, when an interview someone said that O'Leary deserves a statue in the middle of Aliados due to the contribution of the head for development of tourism for the region of Porto. This is the situation, the total situation. 74 airports served, 17 countries. So this dynamic, for sure, with a great impact regarding the tourism in the city of Porto. Impact of low cost, mainly for the cities, but not only for the cities. They spread. They have a great coverage of the market. Main markets, as we saw previously, Spain, except of Madrid, as we saw, all the other airports were low cost. Canaries with the Binter Airlines. Italy, due to the failure of Alitalia, ITA, you name it, so changing name after name. UK, based off Ryanair, EasyJet, Jet2, and any other. And here the effect of Wizz Air in the eastern part, Hungary, Romania, all these countries where Wizz Air dominates. Finally, these are the ones that are not contributing for the tourism. These are the ones that are not contributing for air transportation. It's always a cheaper way to travel, innovative way to travel, and it's a funny way to finish. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. So, any questions to George? Well,
So far, so good.
well, no, I'll leave you with one question still. That is, we have listened and we all know about the positive impact of tourism, etc. So this is never-ending potential. There is no limit. There is no saturation point.
There are some saturation points for sure, and this is the big issue now in terms of this balance that we need between over-tourism and the protests of the residents. But this is not only one thing of cities.
Yeah.
There is over-tourism climbing Everest. We have these situations, and this needs some reflection.
Yeah, so humanity is moving.
Politics always want more because they are evaluated for statistics. More tourists, more revenues, more bed nights, more and more. But this is reflects in territories.
Mm-hmm.
This is reflects in the use of resources, waste, noise, etc. But it's also have good impacts in terms of economics for the regions, for the populations, in terms of social employment, social, human, as this, so it needs a balance. It's always difficult to have this balance because people want more and more tourism, and as you said, there is a limit. Well, let's see.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. George, so, oh, sorry, Henri, yeah? Okay. No, yeah, but if you speak loud, but then we don't take what you say. There are, and they don't listen to you.
So I have a question to follow up on yours. I agree with tourism. I love economics, and I love the world trade and thinking about the world and the variables and drivers of everything and anything. One of my biggest concerns with tourism, and this is having done a big trip now as well, I did about 19,000 kilometers in 13 days. That's probably as efficiently as you can imagine it. I'm crazy efficient when it comes to stuff. But one of the things I looked around, I was thinking, I actually didn't enjoy it so much because tourism is becoming too blatantly obvious. When I used to be a tourist many years ago, I lived all over the world. I've lived in 20 different countries. I think I've seen 120 altogether already. And I see, when I say define a country, you define a country by going to the supermarket and buying a toothpaste. You need to do something real in the country, not just stop there and see it, and learning the language like I told you I could start. One of the things I'm frustrated about in certain countries is tourism is driving a lot, but they're not developing their industries, and that's very dangerous. And actually, I think it's a vicious cycle. So if you take something like France, France is amazing because they have huge tourism, but they also have every possible industry in the world. They do everything. Nuclear, fuel, they have food, fashion, airplanes, boats, everything, right? But if you take an extreme of another one, as much as like Spain, but they're starting to lag behind in industry, although they're still doing certain things, not everything they should do. And I always think there's an imbalance between the two, and we're forgetting it. And I think it's really important we don't lose sight of that. And I wanted to know your views about that, because it's great that you have a Ryanair. Totally agree. Big fan. I respect them, admire them. I have a lot of understanding for what they do. But I also think, as a person of the world and economist, I really believe that we need to continue in evolving. And I feel like tourism sometimes acts like a kind of temporary stop. Oh, it's great, until which point it's over. What do we do now? And people forget that because they're in their little high, right? What do you think?
It's a good point. I was thinking in example, but we are talking about services. And the services, sometimes, okay, you have the hardware in terms of the accommodation, in terms of the restaurants, but talk about experience as you have in the planes. It's difficult to say where this is what Portugal is doing now. It's trying to increase the prices. But when you increase the prices, for locals, it's more difficult to go to in your own country, to go to your hotels. I was thinking an example. It was a good, it's an old example too, but helps to see the impacts of this tourism. In Azores, in the year of 2000 or 1999, you had, it was almost, let's say, 10,000 Swedish tourists. Next, in the 2000, there were 60,000. And the year after, they were 175,000. Why? Because there were a tour operator that have done a lot of charter flights between Malmo to Azores Island. And this is a way for the ones in the Azores. It was a good opportunity because were more movement in terms of hotels, in terms of restaurants, in terms of gastronomy, in terms of tours, in terms of visitors. But again, and we are talking about a market that was very closed. Again, you have this massive tourism that arrives. So these economic impacts, some of them, they will be balanced by price. No doubt about it. This is why you have revenue management in hotels. This is why you have revenue management in airlines, because it's a way that you can try to control. In high season, it's the moment that you know that there is demand, so your prices are going up. So what you have is to try to balance and to try in these over tourism periods that are not massive all year round, try to find the way that these flows all can visit, but in different moments. This is why you have today that some museums, some monuments have already preferred today you only can do your visit online and buy ticket online, and they define that you only can go on during this slot in order to try to spread the visit, not in the same period. In WTTC, you have a lot of economic reports. I'm sure that you know them, not only in this situation, but also in terms of the impacts of tourism. It's true that all of them, you are still in that phase, and you look at the UN WTO statistics until 2030, and this market is still growing. But you have also a different phenomenon. It's almost a question that I can do to you. Are airlines stopping their flights? Because airlines are the ones that are contributing to develop these flows. Because when they put more flights, more people will arrive. And why this is also a different game to be balanced due to these variables. It's not airlines, but are the ones that more contribute for developments of these tourist destinations too.
Okay, yeah. One question. Michael, here.
It's not a question, but a reaction to that. I would dispute that it is airlines that are generating the demand. The demand is there. There are still many, many, many people in the world who have never traveled by plane. And many people have traveled once or twice and they want to travel more. So if we give them the conditions that they can afford and the product that they can enjoy, they will come. I mean, it's amazing when you start looking at the number of international trips per inhabitant of the different countries in the world. And you look at the top and the bottom and how many people are living in the countries in the bottom. This really tells you that if we are able to develop the supply and if we can distribute geographically the demand to avoid this over-tourism, then the total number of air travelers can easily treble over the next 50 years or so. Easily. I remember some 30 years ago, I was in a conference about international tourism, and some guy with a long-term perspective, he said, we are going to have a problem in Europe when the Chinese start coming. We have to start generating alternative destinations in France and in Spain and in the UK, not only inside those countries, but in other countries, so that when the Chinese are coming, we are not overcrowded by those Chinese. Today, we could possibly say when the Indians are coming, because they're still traveling very little outside of India. And so this is something that we will collectively have to learn how to manage the time-wise and the space-wise distribution of this massive latent demand. Airlines are only buying airplanes and putting them on service because they know by their own studies that there is a significant latent demand that they can satisfy if they deliver the product. So it's really, I would say the demand is generated by human curiosity. We're all curious, fortunately. That's all.
2 points, if I...
Yeah.
The backlog of aircrafts, backlog if number of orders that are still to be produced are more than 12 years now. It means that airlines stop to buy today new aircrafts, Boeing and Airbus will have orders, commitments during 12.5 years. The point you said, and if you see the Boeing current market outlook or the Airbus, especially the Airbus, they have that analysis normally well treated. Number of trips per person in different markets. And in Europe, or you have 1 or 2.0 or 1.2, which means that each of us has more than one travel per year. In China, it was 0.3, and in India, 0.08, something like that. In the next 20 years, China, domestic China, in China will be the first market, beating United States and beating between Europe and United States. So these mature markets. And the domestic India will be fourth or fifth. But as you said, these two markets that are growing, and you see by the number of orders from Indigo, for instance, and other airlines, they are huge, 400 aircrafts and more than that. So it will be a challenge. But again, this backlog means a lot. 12 years of production of new aircrafts to satisfy the increase of the market in the next year.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
George.
contribution.
Obrigado.
So before we go to our final, which is, or pre-final, which is the roundtable, the real final are the awards of the redeMOV. And, but before that, Daniel, I want to know whether we have more questions online, or is this the only one? Okay, so it is a bit off the topic, but in any case, so the question is, do we need a bigger airport or a good network of smaller airports in Portugal? So I don't know, Roger, are you still there or not? But I will give a first answer. So I'm happy that you are there, Roger. Okay,
Yes.
so it's a question which is not exactly related with the topic, but in any case, it's of course relevant. And I would say, to start the answer, I would say that depends on the strategy of the country and on the strategy of the agents. But I give you the word, Roger, for this. I think this question was raised after your presentation.
Yes, I mean, I think what you said is right. It depends on the appropriate strategy. And it's, I think the problem is with this, that where you have, with all due respect, a relatively small country that's involved, the loss of the hub effect that we heard expressed very fully from the perspective of TAP into a sort of devolved network would be potentially problematic in terms of that. My concern with this is what happens. It's not about the sort of the major airport. It's how you develop the regional airport networks with that, and whether they can be more effective in order to bring things closer to individuals who are away from the major metropolitan areas. But to give them sort of the opportunity of a sort of dedicated service that they can access reasonably effectively. So I think it's an interesting question. It's a difficult question, but what it does mean is that the strategy has not got to be just about airports. The strategy has got to be about all modes of transport, because if you're going to have a network of airports, you've got to connect them, and you've got to connect them effectively and efficiently.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. So now I invite Jose and Sergio to please come to the stage for a roundtable discussion. So Jose is our emeritus professor of the University of Lisbon, the founder of Transport Systems in the University of Lisbon, and the former secretary from ITF, International Transport Forum from OECD. Please take a seat, Sergio. Come to the floor. Sergio is his most important position is that he is a student from our university and a former student of our university and of our school in particular. And Sergio is today one of the directors of the Metropolitan Transport of Lisbon. So we have the urban view and we have many views here to my left. So I would like to call you to the first question of this session, which is basically how do we bridge between these two networks and what is the role of an airport bridging between the urban network that we have seen supports a lot, and George told us that, supports a lot the final destination, and that's where our curiosity is, and the international network, so the connectivity and all the impacts, the territory impact that is going to cause and that causes that Roger has highlighted us, and together with what we have heard from Henry of what is the strategy of an airline. So I will start with Jose.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by pointing out something that is obvious for all of us, is that whenever we travel to another city, there are not two different trips, the land trip and the air trip. There is one trip. And the experience and the perception of quality of the traveler is integrated. So for me, the land travel, the land component of that trip starts when I get out of the plane, not when I get out of the airport. And this means that even crossing the airport is part of that, both on the outbound and on the inbound. And this is frequently forgotten. We frequently have very poor experiences of going through the airport. I read about a month ago something interesting, that some of the best airports in the world, namely Changi in Singapore, Incheon in Seoul, and there was a third one. I think it was one of the Middle East airports. They were focusing exactly on this. And they were saying, if you allow us to use your electronic data, you can have a totally seamless walk from the door of the plane to the door of the airport, or vice versa, without anybody harassing you. Because you will be identified, we will know where your bag is, we will know what your flight is, everything like that. And you will go as if it was a familiar walk, something that you're very used to do without any barriers. And they said some people will be very sensitive to the privacy of their data. They will still have their, I would say, usual barriers in which they will have to identify themselves again and show their tickets, etc. But for those who are more inclined to have a fluid run through the system, this will be possible. And we're working towards that because we know that for some people, the harassment and the time lost in the airport is a detriment to their travel. The second point I would like to make is that we have to understand that even if all the travelers that come to Lisbon Airport, this one or the future one, they have a common point, which is that airport, they will be very spread out in the territory. Even those that come into Lisbon, they do not all come to the main station. And so we have to consider that no matter how good the connection between the airport and the central point of the transport into the city many people will still have at least one more transfer, and many people two more transfers out of that. And I've had that experience even before I was at the ITF, but especially as I went into the ITF. I traveled several times, both to Tokyo and to Seoul. And in these two cities, they have a very interesting system. Their airports are located at a distance from the city, which is similar to what we will have in Lisbon, some 40 to 50 kilometers. And I've tried several times to take the fast railway connection. These are much bigger cities than Lisbon. Huh? And there I would go into a central station. But then very often my hotel would not be immediately around that station. I would still need to take a subway connection, sometimes with one transfer in the subway. And this carrying, when you go to Japan, most of the times you don't go for 2 days. You need a bigger bag because you stay for more days. And I think in my second or third trip, I discovered something, which is they have something that I found extremely convenient, which is buses which take you to 3 hotels in the city. 3, 4 hotels, no more. And so you have a dedicated service that you have the bag taken care of until the door of your hotel, but you don't have 15 stops. You have 2, 3 stops at the most. Very, very convenient. And in the end, you spend less time than with the train and the transfers. And it's extremely competitive to do that. And I very much hope that when we have the airport of Lisbon 45 kilometers away from the city center, we will be able to develop this type of system. At the time, it will be electric buses, so no problem with the emissions. This is very, very important to make that connection very well. Let me just finish with another point. For that new airport, I think it will be a crime if we do it with a railway connection only to Lisbon. And this connects with the statement I made in reaction to George's presentation, which is if we want to have decent treatment, decent reaction of the inhabitants of Portugal to the increase of tourists into that airport, we have to serve those tourists well, not only in direction of Lisbon, but also in direction of Coimbra and Santarém and Leiria and Batalha and all of that. And that means that line, that railway line has to be a through line to the airport. The high-speed line Porto to Lisbon has to go through the airport and not coming from the airport to Lisbon and then from Lisbon to the rest. This is an absolutely critical perspective of the role of that airport in the national territorial system. No matter whatever we do, because of the number of transfers all over the world, land access to airports is always at least 50% by road. Always. I think I found one when I was doing the demand studies for the new airport. I think I found one in which the road had 49% in one case. In all other cases, it's more than 50% and very often 70 or 75%. Why? Because of the diversity of destinations and because of the facility, of the capacity to provide direct links. We have to do as best we can with public transport, but I gave 2 examples, the railway line, but also the dedicated shuttles to small number of hotels in Lisbon as in other places, of course. And this is something that can be critical. Sorry,
Okay,
I spoke
thank
too
you.
much.
Yeah. Sorry.
Eu começo por vos pedir desculpa, mas poupo-vos ao meu inglês claro e, portanto, arrumar 2 ou 3 ideias. Uma primeira,
Just 1 second. Roger, I think you have to rehearsal your Portuguese now because Sergio will be talking in Portuguese, okay?
sorry.
I should have started by saying, hi, Roger, nice to see you.
Bem, eu, portanto, aqui partilhar 2 ou 3 preocupações, assumindo que o aeroporto é definitivamente um local que está apontado e que a gente desta vez vai mesmo avançar. O professor Jorge Gaspar, numa das aulas, dizia-nos, uma vez mandaram-nos estudar para demonstrar que o sítio que tínhamos apontado era o bom e arranjar um sítio comparativamente mau e depois os indicadores apontaram todos que afinal o sítio mau era o melhor e, portanto, lá voltámos a mudar tudo de sítio. Desta vez eu acho que foi feito um bom trabalho e, portanto, estamos a fechar o tempo. 2 ou 3 preocupações e a primeira é o conjunto de anúncios de infraestruturas que estão anunciados obrigava-nos a ter já alguma cautela com as questões de ordenamento do território. A primeira é um plano de ordenamento do território. A segunda questão é que devia estar já condicionado, em articulação com os municípios, a obrigatoriedade de planos de urbanização para determinadas áreas e algumas regras de reserva de licenciamento urbano. Porque se a gente fizer licenciamento avulso, e dar aqui 2 ou 3 notas, nós temos 2,8 milhões de habitantes na área metropolitana de Lisboa, mas 2 milhões estão na área norte. Nós tínhamos um aeroporto no centro geográfico da área metropolitana de Lisboa e vamos deixar de ter e descentrado e para sítios onde não há propriamente infraestrutura de transporte pesado, nem rápido, nem qualquer solução. O anúncio destas obras e a construção destas obras vão por si só determinar já a necessidade de um número de trabalhadores que significa uma grande pressão urbanística. E que se vai centrar, ainda que a gente tenha ali um conjunto de território que é público por causa do campo de tiro, logo nos limites disso vai haver uma grande pressão. E desde já, isto não é para que daqui a 10 anos, quando o aeroporto estiver a abrir, é antes. E, portanto, primeira grande preocupação, a questão do ordenamento do território. A segunda nota é que a Península de Setúbal tem ainda grandes áreas que não são urbanas, são com atividade agrícola. As alterações recentes legislativas fazem deste território um alvo mais fácil ainda, não é? Com esta pressão que é, vamos precisar de imediato de muitos trabalhadores nestas obras. E, portanto, isto devia estar a pedir alguma cautela sobre a pressão. A segunda grande questão, que eu acho que está muito em cima do nosso tempo, é o tempo. O tempo é muito valioso. Recentemente saiu a notícia de que aumentámos o tempo que perdemos em engarrafamentos por ano nas áreas metropolitanas, Lisboa e Porto, etc. E, portanto, qualquer infraestrutura de acesso ao aeroporto tem que ser, um bocadinho da continuidade do que estava a dizer agora o professor Viegas, uma visão que vai reorganizar toda a área metropolitana e que tem que ser muito rápido, muito eficiente e que responda não apenas ao acesso a Lisboa, mas a toda esta reorganização. Dizer o quê? Nós tivemos aqui algumas transformações significativas, como o passe na área metropolitana de Lisboa, a Carris metropolitana com a oferta rodoviária que aumenta mais de 40% em relação ao que era em 2018, etc. Mas neste momento estamos já com trabalhos para a expansão do metro sul do Tejo à Costa da Caparica e à Trafaria ligando ao Barco, e com o Arco Ribeirinho Sul a iniciar os trabalhos ou a definir os trabalhos para fazer a expansão do metro sul do Tejo para o Oriente. Se é como na solução Light Rail Transport ou BRT ou outra, ver qual, mas esta expansão. A relocalização do aeroporto tem que se enquadrar nesta rede que a gente vai ter que responder, sendo que a resposta não pode ser penalizadora ou muito penalizadora do ponto de vista do tempo. Não é? As pessoas não estão disponíveis para passar uma boa parte do seu tempo nestas coisas, para além de que temos este hábito de ter o aeroporto acessível aqui no centro. Não é? A outra nota é sobre os trabalhadores, que têm aqui 2 abordagens sobre isto. No acesso dos trabalhadores ao aeroporto e na vivência de quem trabalha no aeroporto. Os aeroportos tendem a ser ilhas, isoladas com alguma distância do espaço urbano normal. Do estudo que foi feito empresarial aqui para o aeroporto de Lisboa, havia uma grande indicação de que uma boa parte dos trabalhadores diziam: eu, para almoçar, que não seja numa cantina, vou fora do aeroporto, porque senão é tudo muito caro. Quem diz isto diz um conjunto de outras atividades que a gente recorre diariamente e, portanto, induzem a utilização do transporte. A segunda nota é que hoje o transporte público concorre não só com o transporte individual, mas com o TVDE também. Isto é, há uma parte significativa das viagens, tem a ver com um estudo também que uma vez fez ainda no Fórum Transporte Internacional, que indicava que uma boa parte do transporte regular devia vir a ser convertido em transporte flexível, de alguma forma responsivo em relação às dinâmicas. E, portanto, Nós hoje assistimos a que a resposta por TVDE é mais eficiente do que o transporte público regular de passageiros. E, portanto, tem que... Porque evita transbordo. Pois, pronto. E, portanto, a solução de rede que tem que ser criada e do conjunto de respostas que tem que haver dentro do aeroporto tem que responder a algumas destas necessidades. Isto é, se as pessoas não tiverem onde almoçar ou almoçar lá é tão caro, a minha resposta é, se eu não tiver uma boa rede de transporte, vou recorrer ao TVDE ou vou, mas é transporte individual, porque isso depois me dá a liberdade de a qualquer momento entrar, sair e fazer as deslocações que tenho. Uma outra preocupação é a logística. Os aeroportos têm que responder hoje a um crescente número, até pela localização de empresas, etc., às questões logísticas, e a rede de oferta, a rede de acessibilidade ao aeroporto tem que ser, e vale a pena equacionar se o acesso, se o transporte até do combustível para os aviões deve ser por modo rodoviário. Não é? E vale a pena. Pronto, esperemos que seja acautelada esta outra dinâmica, não é? E por último é que no espaço do aeroporto consigamos ter espaços para o pedonal e o ciclável como forma de deslocação interna, porque são grandes áreas, e estas grandes áreas pedem hoje uma resposta que pode ser também, o que ele tem é que ser muito confortável, seguro, atrativo. E, portanto, como notas introdutórias.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. So you have raised a number of issues related with one issue that I think it will form my second question. That is, does all this, and we have heard from Henry that the big challenge was today doing transport systems which would be flexible and agile. Is this, in fact, forcing us to change our planning paradigm?
I would say that if you compare the possibility of being flexible, transport is the easy part of the problem. Land use is the difficult part. Let me come back to something that Sergio just mentioned, that study we did in the ITF about demand responsive shared transport. I have great hopes that in a not too distant future, with the combination of essentially data mining, artificial intelligence methods, combined exploring the, I would say, strong regularity of our displacement patterns in urban areas, it will be relatively easy to find solutions of shared transport that will be as cheap as public transport or cheaper, and as convenient as individual transport, in the sense that people do not need a transfer. This cannot be done overnight, but it can be introduced gradually. I remember some years ago, some 20 years ago or so, and Roger and Henry probably know that much better than I, when just shortly after the introduction of Heathrow Express, there was so many people coming at Paddington and wanting to take a taxi that the queue for the taxi would take you longer than the time to go from Heathrow to Paddington. And they started introducing shared taxis with human organizers that say, are you going to Kensington? Are you going to here? Are you going to that? And they would put people in the same taxi. This today could easily be done, particularly if we have this integrated multimodal chains, as you were mentioning, with the tickets till the destination. It can be very easily organized that when you come to the airport, you go on this bus or this train, and then when you go to the destination, you go to the parking lot, and there you will see van number 38, which take you and 3 other people to the same area of the city. So you can have a really seamless integration that can be done. And so this will be, I would say, real-time flexibility. Of course, all of this takes a lot of systems integration, data integration, but for the traveler, this can be relatively simple to do. The difficult part is what Sergio was mentioning, is how do you organize the land use in a way that can provide efficiency in this? Because land use is very, very inflexible once you've done it. But if you do it poorly, the maximum level of efficiency in the travel can be severely hampered, because the combination of activities in the territory is so bad. So it's really something which demands a lot of foresight and caution, which unfortunately I don't see in abundance, at least in this country.
So Sergio, you are an insider in the system. So what do you think, in face of all the needs that you have sort of listed, what do you think we need to change in our planning process?
Bem, uma primeira preocupação é esta do ordenamento do território e saber que uma boa parte das soluções de transportes são dependentes das soluções de ordenamento do território que a gente toma. Não é? A segunda é
planeamento integrado.
Planeamento integrado. A segunda questão é, e eu acho que estamos a fazer isso, e já demos alguns passos, a própria revisão das soluções institucionais com que estamos a trabalhar. Isto é, há 5 anos atrás, ou há 10 anos atrás, não estaríamos em condições sequer de criar um título de transporte como o que criámos agora. Não é? E associámos estas alterações institucionais a uma solução de financiamento. Hoje temos um programa de incentivo a mais TP, para dar uma noção, porque fiz estas contas a semana passada, o apoio ao sistema tarifário em 2018 do Estado correspondeu a 26,2 milhões de euros, e o ano passado nós estamos só na área metropolitana, 26 na área metropolitana, e o ano passado, com o incentivo a mais TP, atingiremos 300 e quase 30 milhões de euros.
Mais 10 vezes mais.
Portanto, em menos de 10 anos, 7 anos. E, portanto, esta é uma alteração estruturante que nos cria estas condições. E estamos agora, acho eu, com a TML e com as soluções que estão a ser criadas, em condições de começar a ter planeamento e uma solução. Até esta questão de termos hoje uma carris metropolitana, que é uma visão que desenha uma rede conjunto, que define em conjunto o que é a solução de transporte regular rodoviária de passageiros, é um passo muito grande em relação ao que havia antes. Uma solução propriamente não integrada, não pensada, sem um sistema tarifário que correspondesse a nada. Nós tínhamos 900 títulos ocasionais só nos operadores privados rodoviários, não é? Foram convertidos em 3 tipos de títulos em função do tipo de serviço, não é? Longa distância, o regular e o de proximidade. E, portanto, só com uma diferença de preço entre o ser pré-comprado ou ser comprado a bordo, penalizando a compra a bordo, claro. E, portanto, eu acho que estamos em condições, e estamos neste momento a fazer, por exemplo, o Plano Metropolitano de Mobilidade Urbana Sustentável, que também começa a cozer e a dar alguma integração nestas questões todas, não é? Portanto, eu acho que estamos a fazer o caminho, quer institucional, quer ao nível do planeamento, quer ao nível... Nós começamos a ter um modelo de transportes 4 passos para a área metropolitana de Lisboa, temos um projeto bicular que modelou o potencial de infraestrutura ciclável na área metropolitana de Lisboa, com a identificação troço a troço sobre o potencial de ganhos, de captação, de transferência do transporte individual para o transporte, para a bicicleta, etc. E, portanto, eu acho que estamos a construir essa alternativa. Agora, e estamos a fazer uma outra coisa que é muito importante e que na própria construção de transportes metropolitanos de Lisboa, que é a integração da questão tecnológica nisto, porque uma boa parte das respostas vão ser tecnológicas. Isto é, se nós tivermos um modelo integrado, com informação integrada e que seja capaz de juntar as várias ofertas tecnológicas, seja de bicicletas partilhadas ou outras, seja de TVDs, seja de todo este conjunto de oferta, começar a ter algum sentido, nós nos conseguirmos identificar perante o sistema e sem soluções complicadas de pagamento, conseguirmos pagar um estacionamento, o transporte, a bicicleta partilhada e qualquer outra coisa, acho que podemos ter aqui uma boa resposta.
Okay, thank you. So any questions from the floor or from the cloud? to these two gentlemen?
Rosario, can I
Yeah, of
come
course.
back on a couple of points that Jose made? First of all, don't forget that airports employ people. And one of the problems about putting airports a long way away from cities is you put them a long way away from where people live. A very large proportion of the traffic that's generated by airports is simple commuting by the employees. And that's where an airport that is well within an urban area like Heathrow, for example, has an advantage of being able to use very high levels of public transport because people live relatively close to the airport. And so that's, I think, one issue. The transport, the ground transport is not just about passengers. It's also about the people who serve the passengers. The other point, which I do agree with, is the point you made earlier about the ease of getting from the plane to wherever you're going, or vice versa. And I was thinking about this. I was in Washington last week for a TRB conference, and now the Silver Line has eventually been extended out to Dulles Airport. But when you come into the main terminal of Dulles Airport on those sort of strange little people mover things, you then have a very long walk to a remote station. When you go up onto a platform that is totally exposed in temperatures that were very cold last week, and it's not a very warm welcome. It's nice to be able to sort of delve down into an underground station that's within the terminal, or something like you have at Hong Kong, where the station is integrated within the airport. And I think it is important to think about the way that you interface there and not make it a sort of little add-on that's been put on later, because if you're going to get people to use public transport there, it's got to be convenient, and it's got to be so that you can get to it. And of course now, I mean, your taxi point, of course, is less relevant now. The Elizabeth line serves intermediate stations and goes right the way through the centre of London and provides much better interchange with a wider range of public transport options. But it's thinking about that. And that, I think, is the problem then when you've got a remote airport, that the only thing you can do is to build a link that links to the major destination for most people. And whilst I sympathize with the point you're making, I'm thinking about the way that it's actually very, very difficult to provide the range of options that people need when you're way outside the urban infrastructure with that. And I think that's an important consideration to make.
Thanks for your comments, Roger. In the case of Lisbon, the decision has been recently taken about what hopefully will be the definitive location after a process that has had several iterations. But in the process, we also have to see that if we had not made some major mistakes, planning or settlement mistakes in the areas around the current Lisbon airport, it would have been possible. And these mistakes were made in the 90s when it was obvious already that the Lisbon airport would not have the capacity. But there are some buildings that were made there, large buildings, that have prevented the construction of a second parallel runway.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, we also have a number of residents, an increasing number and increasingly vocal residents, who are saying this is too much noise. We are sick of it. Take this thing out of this place. So there's a lot of tension there. In the process, I was head of the team who made the demand studies for the selection of the new location, and also including the ground transport movement. So I also looked at the movement of the workers in the airport, and it is indeed significant. And we also saw that of the current workers in Lisbon Airport, there is a significant part of them that are not so close to the airport, and another significant part who, even if they are close, they still drive instead of using public transport because they're offered free parking and things like that. But in relation to this, something that Sergio said, I think of the expansion of the Metro Sul do Tejo there. I think the fact that the airport is coming on the left bank, is located in the left bank, and if we do the connection, the railway connection through there, inevitably some of the not long distance trains, but some of the local, more regional trains will have a stop somewhere around Barreiro in a place with a connection to that line, because the peninsula of Setúbal has 800,000 inhabitants today and will probably increase. And so it's totally stupid to force all of them to come to Lisbon and then go back to that side of the river. So it's something that could easily, I would say, be integrated into the layout of the line, the stations where it is serving, and the timetables, service timetables that you do. But it's also easy to forget that. So we have to keep talking about it, because otherwise it will not be dealt. But in general, I think that it is, how should I say, very often we all tend to think about only the main segment, the people who go into the center of the city. Fortunately, today, with the data that we have, or that we could have access to, it would be relatively simple to say, how can I serve all these segments? And this is something that I hope will be integrated into the service planning of the connections to the airport.
Okay, do you want to add?
Now, let me just give an example. Sorry.
Shortly, please.
Yeah. Now, imagine going in the direction of what Sergio was saying. Imagine when I use the shared bikes, I have to identify myself. When I use public transport, I do not identify myself. I have a card which has a number which is not related to me. It's funny that the bikes and the public parking and the car parking have the same company, so it's the same identifier, but public transport not, at least for the moment.
Quem tem o passe navegante hoje de Lisboa já pode usar as giras. Já está integrado no mesmo.
Temos que ver isso a seguir. Pronto, okay. But basically, no, what I'm saying is the following. If you are a regular user with the same identifier in all of these things, it would be quite simple to organize targeted small-scale public transport solutions, these shared rides, to provide transfer-free service to many, many people who today use their car because their best solution with public transport implies 2 or more transfers.
Just to close, let me tell you 2 things. One is that Magda from ANA Airports is just recalling us very well that the airport perimeter is the major employer in the city. Second, when we talk about having the same identification, don't forget that the tourists don't have that identification very often. So, and that is an element that we have to take into account in this bridging between the network, the urban network, and the international network. And just to, just 2 minutes, because it talks too much, so you are entitled to 2 minutes.
Não, mas a qualidade merece essa diferença. Eu só dar 2 ou 3 notas. Uma primeira é 76% dos trabalhadores no levantamento feito no estudo sobre o aeroporto, os trabalhadores no aeroporto, 76% trabalhavam em turnos. Nós temos neste momento um projeto com a ANA Aeroportos, precisamente num consórcio europeu, que é a resposta noturna a estes trabalhadores. Isto é, se eu entrar às 4 da manhã não há nenhum serviço de transporte regular e, portanto, só vou de carro. Já não volto de outra maneira, não seja de carro. A resposta que está a ser feita é criar um serviço a pedido para os trabalhadores que estejam num determinado eixo, que, utilizando o próprio navegante, possam ter esse serviço de acesso ao aeroporto e depois, no turno, quando saírem, ao meio-dia, à 1 ou às 2, já têm um transporte regular e, portanto, resposta por transporte regular. Isto é, precisamos, de facto, responder a um aeroporto que tem serviços que não são os habituais para ter uma resposta para também este grupo de trabalhadores. Uma segunda nota é, nós também já fizemos um estudo de logística na área metropolitana de Lisboa. Uma das conclusões é recomendar fazer-se um MARL, um mercado abastecedor, na região de Setúbal. Não tem muito sentido estar tudo concentrado, por cima numa margem e sempre a atravessar as pontes, etc. Estas infraestruturas devem ser coerentes, não é? Do ponto de vista...
Pensadas.
E, portanto, tudo pensado nesta lógica. Uma última nota é precisamente com a integração institucional e tecnológica, já nos permite hoje que a EML e em Lisboa, quem comprar o passe tem a possibilidade de ter acesso às giras gratuitas, está integrado já no sistema, e a solução institucional que está prevista já para transportes metropolitanos prevê o alargamento de responsabilidades, incluindo até ao estacionamento, quanto mais não seja da articulação e do sistema integrado de pagamentos, etc. E, portanto, a tal solução institucional que a gente pode começar a pensar e a responder e depois suportada em tecnologia que facilite este mecanismo.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you to both of you. And yeah, not allowed, only outside, okay? Thank you both to all of you, to you. And so now I ask Nuno so you can please return to your places. I ask Nuno to come here. And now we arrive to the most important moment of our conference, which is becoming already a tradition, right, Nuno? That in this annual conference, we give the awards to the students who have applied for these awards with their dissertation. And so we have the best dissertations in masters and PhDs who have, of course, applied for the awards. And so every year we have this possibility. And so today we are giving the awards correspondence to 2023. 23. And after today, we will announce the awards or the possibility of tendering for the awards of 24. So now I give the word to Nuno to identify our awardees.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for these 4 hours of conference. Very interesting, discussing a very important issue and considering that much of scales, different scales, must be taken into account when we discuss the air transport and airports and airlines and so on. It's not only in the space, but on the land when we have very different scales. And now for the presentation of the 24 redeMOV prize for the master, we have Francisco Plácido, that his work assessing alternative scenarios for the reduction transpoverty at urban scale, case study in Lisbon. Is a master of science degree in mechanical engineering. Thank you. And okay, we have special mention, a menção rosa for the PhD approval to Gabriel Costa Valença, allocating road space dynamically over time in complex urban areas. And finally, the PhD prize to Ana Rita Sousa Martins with the work Peer-to-Peer Autonomous Car Sharing, a system architecture and impact assessment for Lisbon, please. Congratulations. Yeah, sure.
One additional information. Please pay attention to our website, because each of these awardees is going to have one session just for the presentation of their research work, and that will be done within the initiative of what we call conversations, research conversations at Tuesdays. So it is the second Tuesday of each month, and so the next 3 second Tuesdays of each coming months will be for these 3 awardees to do the presentation of their research. And it is, of course, very worth for everybody to attend, because it is new knowledge, new science that we are transferring to the society, and it is a very good experience for these young persons that are initiating their professional lives. So, can I close?
Yes, sure.
Okay, then I close. So thank you very much to all for being here. It has been, to our perspective, a very good session and a very well participated session in this model of hybrid and presential. A special word of thanks to the speakers, Roger, George, Ruben, and Henri, for your contributions, valuable contributions that have given us insight and inspiration, and also to Jose and Sergio for the discussion. That could be an unstoppable discussion, as we could see, and they will continue after the break. So thank you all very much, and we hope to see you in our conversations at Tuesdays. Okay, thank you.